What is up, YouTube? We are back. We are working on our second review video. Today, we're going to be talking about Mandalorian and Grogu. But real quick, I want to give a shout out to my mom for giving me this really awesome shirt, and because yesterday was her birthday. So, Mom, love you. But anyway, before we start, this is my second official review video. So, obviously, some people might not be used to how I do my review videos. They are a little bit on the longer side, which I mean, is a personal choice. If you don't like that, you can always just watch parts of it. But basically, I have my videos that work in 2 halves. I have my opening half, which is spoiler free. So if you have not seen the movie or, you are choosing not to see the movie, you can watch that half. And then I will obviously let you guys know. I'll be like, hey guys, we're ending spoiler section. So if you haven't watched it, maybe go watch it and then come back. But if you don't care, then it means no difference to you. But if you are interested in how I do my movie reviews, I do have an introduction video that is, on the channel. So go check that out if you guys are interested in, how I do my like dot by dot. But other than that, we're gonna go ahead and get started. So, all right, like I said, second review video we're doing right now is on Star Wars: The Mandalorian and Grogu. So this movie came out on May 22nd, 2026. It is PG-13, 2 hours and 12 minutes, and it is a really good movie. Like, I'm just gonna be honest with you guys. I think it's a really good movie. Basically, a brief synopsis of the movie, just like kind of like in my own words, without any spoilers, is the Mandalorian, Din Djarin, and Grogu have been helping the New Republic recently round up some ex-Imperial officers, and along the way, they end up running into the Hutts. So, if you guys remember Jabba the Hutt, this is basically his siblings, or at least I think one of them is. But anyway, no, it is because it's one. Sorry, it's their siblings or cousins. I don't know, one of the two, and yeah, I think it's siblings. Basically, they're looking for their nephew Rada the Hutt, who is Jabba the Hutt's son, which you may or may or not have seen from Star Wars: The Clone Wars, the first animated movie, which is definitely dated, but it's a really good movie. Go check it out. But anyway, they're looking for their nephew, and so the Mandalorian and Grogu agree to help them due to some workings that they have or some information they have on an ex-imperial officer. But along the way, the situation gets kind of fuzzy, and they end up in the Hutt family's crosshairs. So there's a lot that goes on here. I don't really want to get into the weeds of it because I don't want to spoil anything. But that's basically the story without getting like too in depth. It's a really good, it's a really fun film. I'll say. Like hold on, because it's very much like the show, but it's very much different. Give me a second. I'll get into it in a second because I have a section that I want to get into it, but just give me 1 second. All right, so this movie has a bunch of big names like Pedro Pascal. If you don't know, he is the voice actor of Mandalorian and Grogu. We have a return actors and actresses that we have seen in the show or in other shows. For example, Sigourney Weaver is back. She is playing Colonel Ward, a colonel for the New Republic, who is kind of like, in charge of, I wouldn't say really in charge of Mando, but kind of, she's giving him the information on these ex-Imperial officers. Or we have Steve Blum, who is the voice actor, and he did the mocap, so shout out to bro, of Zeb, who we have seen, and Rebels, which is also a good show. Definitely go check that out. And then we also have a new voice actor. Yes, we have a new voice actor today, or not today, in the movie, Jeremy Allen White. If you've not seen Jeremy Allen White, he plays Carmy from The Bear, which is an awesome show. Definitely go check that out. And he actually did a really good job in the show. He's the one that actually is voicing Rod of the Hutt, so he does an awesome job. And there's a bunch of other actors and actresses in this movie, but for the most part, it's a pretty small cast. But yeah, so beyond that, this movie is directed by Jon Favreau. He has directed a lot of other movies. If you guys have seen Chef, Iron Man 2, stuff like that. He's a really good actor. He's a really good actor, but he's a really good director. He does a really good job here, especially working with Dave Filoni, who is kind of not exactly, but to me, the way I think of it, and it makes sense in my head, he's kind of like the Kevin Feige of Star Wars as of right now. Both of them have been working together on The Mandalorian show and a bunch of other projects, and they're doing a really good job here. I think Jon Favreau co-wrote this with Dave Filoni and one other person, and so they're having a bunch of fun. Obviously, Jon Favreau really loves Star Wars, and you can really feel that in this movie because there's a lot of I would say deep cuts, but nothing too crazy niche that you may not know. But I mean, there are some things that you're kind of like, oh, okay, that's cool that we got like so and so, or like we're going here, or seeing this species. There's a lot of love in this movie. I think it's really cool and really awesome. Um, Currently, because my review is like a few months late, there's not like really any like current news about this movie. I guess basically like the only like real news is that it's been a few years, like I would say more than a few years since the Star Wars movie has come out in theaters. So this is the most recent one, and then now that like the movie's been out for a while, I guess I can say this because it is news. It didn't do the best at the box office. People kind of say it flopped. I mean, I guess it did numbers wise, but I mean, like I to me, and I mean to a lot of other people, it didn't do like bad like reception wise. But there are some people, there are like a group of people that don't love this movie, and I would even say hate. But like, I don't really want to get into that. Like, that's more of like a spoiler talk. So I would just kind of like leave it up to you. I'd say I always say this when I talk about movies: definitely form your own opinion. You know, I think that's the best way to perceive art. Like art is like you interpret it differently. So why would you let somebody else's opinion, diminish your take on an art? But I mean, that's my opinion. You can make your own opinion. But obviously, like I do understand, like times are tough. Nobody can go to the movies every week, so you like check Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb. See the reviews. I get that. I do that. I do that at the same time, even though like I try not to, but still, I do suggest go checking out this movie. It's a good Star Wars movie. It's a good family movie, and it's really action packed. Like obviously, if you don't have a family, like definitely still go check it out. It's a really good movie. But yeah, to get into like a brief review, so more like talking on this movie. Like I was saying before, I got into actors and actresses. It's a really good film. Like like obviously there's not a lot I can say here that's not spoilers, but like check it out. It is a good action-packed film. Yes, it's targeted more towards like I guess like a family demographic, but like I don't think that's its downfall. Like I think there are some issues which I mean are not should not be a reason that you don't go see this movie. But like obviously, like if you watch it, you'll be like, oh, you didn't like A, B, or C. But like you should still go see it. It's a really good film. I think anybody that's a Star Wars fan definitely should go watch it. I know some people that aren't Star Wars fans, but they love Mandalorian and Grogu. They should definitely go watch that. Or like, I think if you're just like, obviously, it's probably not that in many theaters now, but if it were, and you got like a free movie ticket, I would definitely suggest go watching this. It's a good movie. I will say that if you're like a Star Wars fan or like you've seen Star Wars movies, this isn't like a typical Star Wars film in the sense that like it's not like an all-out war between the good guys, whether it be the Jedi or you know the Republic or the rebels, whatever you want to call them, versus the Sith and the Empire. It's not that type of movie. It's a very small, contained movie within the Star Wars universe. Like I think it does a good job at like bringing in like really well known aspects and maybe like lesser known aspects. Like I don't think that many people know who Rada the Hutt is, unless you watch Clone Wars. But a lot of people know who Jabba is because he's in literally Return of the Jedi. Or maybe not a lot of people know who the bounty hunter Imbo is. Well, I don't know if I pronounced that right, but you know what I'm saying. Or maybe they don't know what Tal Hutta is, the planet of the Hutt, stuff like that. But they do bring in a lot of like, see, when I say deep cut, I don't really mean like Star Killer. I can't even say Star Killer is deep cut, but you know what I mean. Like it's not nothing like Legends, right? But it's maybe stuff that you've seen in comics or like shows or books. And also like some popular stuff like Mandalorian and Grogu, like they're very popular, and they kind of mix it together. And to me, the way I think about it is like it's kind of funny. But you might call me fat too if I say this. But like it's like if you were to like let's think of Star Wars, right? It's an ice cream, or like just a big thing of ice cream. Like the more like you go down, the more you get like in the niche, kind of like an iceberg. Like I would say, like this is your ice cream. The more you like this is the top, like this is all the well known Star Wars stuff. I would say it's like in the middle here. Like you're getting like a scoop out of that like middle ice cream with well known and like kind of like lesser known stuff, and you mix it together, and it makes it feel like really authentic, and that everything in this movie is like real, not just like oh I don't know anything, or like oh my god this is all like fan service, like stuff like that. Because like that's something that you could kind of say is an issue with the sequels. Like it's a new story, yes, But there are a lot of things where you're like, "Oh my god, I saw that guy from the original trilogy," or like, "Oh my god, I know that guy from Clone Wars." You know, like there's a lot of that in the sequel trilogy. And in this movie, I mean, like, yeah, there's a few things where you're like, "Oh my god, that's Rada," but like, we don't know who Rada is, you know. Like the reason I say it's like, sort of like the sequel trilogy, but not, it's because everybody knows who Chewbacca is. Everybody knows who Darth Vader is. Everybody knows who, like, the original gang, right? Not everybody knows Rada, right? So like that's what I'm saying. Like it's kind of like a mixture of both. And to me, that's what makes a movie a good. Like that's what makes it a good movie. Like again, like I said, it's just like a very small, compact film that's telling its own type of story, and it's not like other Star Wars films. Like I was saying, it's not like this huge guns ablazing, Jedi like swinging their sabers, going ape shit. Like all full out war movie. It's just a small, compact film that takes from both sides, and it makes it feel real. So that's why I say Star Wars fans should go watch. That's why I say anybody should really go watch it. It's really fun. Like there's a lot of action. There's a bunch of comedy, and it's not like, oh my god, MCU humor. And like I don't even like using that term because like, yeah, I guess it's like a real thing, but like I don't know. I feel like people like kind of get carried away with that term, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean. It's not like cheap humor. Like it's funny. Like there's funny moments, but it doesn't take away from like the dramatic moments. Now I will say, I don't know if this is really a spoiler, but like since it's such a small contained story, it doesn't really add anything to the bigger Star Wars world, which like I know is a gripe. So like if you're really like you know like, does it break the timeline? Like are we gonna get some like crazy reveal? No, right? But I mean that's why it's still a good film. Like definitely go check it out. Like I saw some people saying like this is a filler. I mean, yeah, I guess you could say that, right? I mean, if you really wanted to, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, like the way Star Wars works is like they come out with their movies, and their shows, and then like 20 years down the road, like beep boop, like somebody in the fucking background has like 20 movies now, and you're like, oh, that paid off. Well, I mean, like, yeah, it paid off now because they actually have the projects of that character, that were in the original thing. So like, who knows if this movie is gonna in 10 years time gonna be like really big, you need to watch it, but like as of right now you don't really need to like, I wouldn't even say you don't even need to watch the Mandalorian show to watch this movie. I mean, like you should, but you don't have to. Like you just pick up the movie and you watch it. You've never seen the Mandalorian in your life. I'm pretty sure you get the gist. You're like, oh yeah, Baby Yoda. I mean, that's not his name. His name's Grogu, but and you got the badass like space cowboy. And like I'm pretty sure if you've never seen Star Wars, you know who Jabba the Hutt is. Like he's a pretty familiar looking dude. You might think somebody is Jabba the Hutt, but they get around to saying that Jabba the Hutt is not there. But yeah, without a doubt, it's a pretty fun film. Like I said, action packed. Like obviously, it doesn't add a lot to the huge Star Wars story, but I think that's fine. Like when I get into the spoiler section, like I'll kind of explain it more. But I think it's just a good film. Whether you should watch it, like I've said this already. If it was still in theaters, I would suggest it. Maybe if you don't like exactly want to send like the whole family, stuff like that. Maybe don't. Obviously, we're getting closer to that time where it's going to be released on streaming. So just because of when I'm doing this review, like definitely check it out on streaming. And if you really like it, like buy the film, right? I mean, I wouldn't say digitally. I would say buy physically, but you get what I mean. Or if you want to rent it online, like I don't see an issue with that, especially if it's like on the cheaper end. I would not suggest renting this for like, I don't know, like renting's pretty crazy on like online now. Like I don't suggest renting like digital films. Like I mean like I guess you could if you really wanted to, but just to me, like I don't do it. But I guess if you really wanted to, maybe wait till this movie's on the cheaper side. I don't think renting a film is a good bargain, like at all. Like right? And, yeah, I'd rather go see it in theaters. But that's me. Like I like being in the movies. I like that atmosphere and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I would definitely suggest watching it on streaming. Like I feel like a lot of people could have a fun time watching this on streaming, like especially if you're like with the family and you're like, hey, let's pick out a film tonight. Like this is a perfect movie. This is a perfect movie for that. Like I said, if you're a Star Wars fan, definitely check it out. If you like sci-fi, check it out. Yeah, it's a good film. You should definitely check it out. Like I said, yeah, there are some issues that I'll get into in the spoiler section, but like don't go into this expecting like, oh my god, this is the end game for Star Wars. Like no, that's not what this is. It's literally just a small Star Wars film. It's doing its own thing. Like I
unnecessary
said, it's not a
spoilers
huge
section.
war
Like,
film.
don't go
That's
into
a
this
part of the
expecting like,
Skywalker
oh my
saga.
god, this
Like
is the
everybody
ending
calm
of
down.
like, no,
You know.
that's not the
But
same.
yeah,
It's just a
it's a
small.
good film.
This is
I
literally just a
suggest
small
it.
Star Wars film.
All right.
Um,
But
it's doing its own thing.
moving
Like I said,
along,
it's not a huge war
spoiler
film.
warning. I gotta
It's a
say it
part of
like
the
3 more times.
Skywalker
Spoiler
saga.
warning, spoiler warning, spoiler
Like,
warning.
calm down. Like,
Now that we have
but yeah,
done, the
it's a good
spoiler
film.
free
I
section, we are
suggest.
getting into spoiler
All right,
zone. So
but
anything
moving
beyond this
along.
point, will be
I gotta say it
having
like three more
spoilers. So if
times.
you have not
Spoiler
seen the
warning,
film,
spoiler warning,
or
spoiler
you don't
warning.
want to hear
Now
spoilers, please
we're getting
click
into
off.
spoiler
If
zone.
you do not
So
care,
anything beyond this
please proceed.
point,
I will say, like,
anything
if
beyond
you
this
want
point
to watch me like break down the
means
movie
spoilers. So
and
if
you
you have
haven't
not
seen it,
seen
like
the
go
film,
watch it and then come
or
back.
you don't
I'm
want to
more
hear
than happy with
spoilers,
that. But I'm just saying, like, I don't want
click
people in the
off.
comments being like,
If you
Josh,
do not
why'd you
care,
spoil the film?
please proceed. I will say,
Like
if
in
you
all
want to
realness, like this
watch
movie
me
came out a long
break
time ago.
down
I
the
won't say a long
movie
time ago, but
and
like
you
a
haven't
while
seen it, like
ago.
go
So like
watch it and then come back. I'm more
spoilers
than
online.
happy
But
with that.
no,
But I'm
in
just saying, like, I
reality,
don't want
if
people
you
in
have
the
not seen
comments
the
to be like,
film or you don't
Josh,
want
why'd you
spoilers,
spoil the
I
film?
would say click off and then come back later once you've
Like, in
seen it.
all
But if
realness,
you
like,
don't
this movie
care,
came
we're
out a
gonna go
long
ahead
time
and
ago.
get
I
into
won't say
this
a long time
Johnson.
ago, but like a while
All
ago.
right,
So like,
so
spoilers
time
online.
for a
No,
detailed review of the
in
story.
reality,
So
if you have
basically,
not seen the
like I
film or you
said,
don't want
the
spoilers, I would say
Mandalorian
click off
and
and then come
Grogu,
back later
Din
once you've
Djarin and
seen it.
Grogu,
But if you don't
have
care,
been
we're
helping
gonna
the New
go ahead.
Republic recently grab ex-Imperial
Detailed review of
officers.
the
Because if you know
story.
anything about
So
Star Wars,
basically, like
the
I
Mandalorian
said,
takes
the
place.
Mandalorian and Grogu,
Obviously,
Din
this
Djarin
movie
and
takes place
Grogu,
after the
have
three
been helping
seasons
the
of
New Republic
Mandalorian and the
recently
one season of
grab
the Book of Boba
ex-Imperial
Fett. But
officers. Because if you know anything
basically,
about Star Wars, the
the
Mandalorian
whole
takes
story of
place.
Mandalorian or the
Obviously, this movie
Mandalorian
takes place
takes
after the
place
three seasons
after
of
the events of
Mandalorian and the
Return of
one
the
season
Jedi,
of the
when
Book of Boba Fett.
the
But
rebels take
basically,
down the
the
Empire the second
whole
time,
story of
and
Mandalorian
it's all
or the
dispersed. The
Mandalorian
Emperor is
takes place
dead.
after the events of
Darth Vader
Return of the
is
Jedi,
dead, literally.
when the
Luke went
rebels
off to
take
go
down
start
the Empire the second
Jedi
time,
Temple.
and it's all
The rebel
dispersed. The
the
Emperor
Rebel
is
Alliance is making
dead.
a new government
Darth
called the
Vader
New
is
Republic,
dead,
and they're
literally.
trying to really put a
Luke went
firm
off to
fist
go
down,
start
try to get everything back on track.
Jedi Temple.
It's been like 15
The
or like 20
rebel
years, I don't know,
the Rebel Alliance is
something
making
like
a new
that,
government
10,
called the New
15 years
Republic, and they're trying
after
to
Return of the
really
Jedi.
put a
We've already
firm
gone through the
fist
three
down,
seasons
try to get
of
everything back on
Mandalorian and
track.
Grogu.
It's been like
I'm
15
not gonna
or
break
like
that
20
down
years, I don't know,
here. Like I
something
said
like
earlier
that.
in the
10,
review,
15 years
if you've seen
after
those
Return of the
shows,
Jedi.
the
We've
seasons, then
already
like
gone through
it
the three
makes sense. If
seasons
you
of
haven't, the
Mandalorian
movie
and
still
Grogu.
makes sense
I'm not
nonetheless.
gonna break that down
But
here.
basically, I just kind of
Like
want
I
to give you like
said
a brief,
earlier
like,
in the
oh, like who
review,
is the New
if you've
Republic? It's
seen
basically just the
those
rebellion from
shows
the
or
original
seasons, then like
trilogy.
it makes
They
sense. If
finally
you
made the
haven't,
government.
the movie still
That's what
makes
it
sense
is.
nonetheless.
But yeah,
But basically, I just kind of want to give you like a
but so
brief,
basically, the movie starts
like who
with the
is the New Republic?
Mandalorian
It's
and
basically just the
Grogu. They're
rebellion
hunting
from the
down
original
a
trilogy.
or I won't say
They
brand new,
finally made the
a
government.
new
That's what
Imperial
it is.
officer, ex
But
Imperial
yeah.
officer that we did see in season
But
three
so
of
basically, the movie
the
starts with the
Mandalorian when
Mandalorian
Thrawn
and
is no,
Grogu. They're hunting down
when
a
Moff
brand
Gideon
new,
is
or I won't say brand
talking
new,
to people on the
a
screen.
new
They are
Imperial
there.
office,
So if
ex
you're like,
Imperial
oh, were they
officer that we
there?
did
Yeah, they
see
are.
in
So
season
they're not
three
just like
of
random like
the
people
Mandalorian
that
when
just show
Thrawn
up.
is no.
But yes.
When Moff
So the
Gideon
first
is
person that
talking
they
to
run
people on the
into is
screen,
an
they are
ex-Imperial
there. So if you're
officer
like, oh,
named
were they
Officer
there? Yeah, they
Barrow
are.
or
So they're not just
Barrow,
like
however
random
you
like
pronounce it.
people that just show
Basically, they're
up.
on this like
But
huge like
yes.
snowy mountain
So the first
area,
person
kind of like
that they
Solo,
run
but not
into
really.
is
It's
an
a different place, I
ex-Imperial
think. But
officer,
anyway, he's basically talking with some people that
Barrow,
are in the
however you
system.
pronounce
He's
it.
like,
Basically, they're on this
hey,
like
the Empire's
huge like
coming
snowy
back.
mountain.
You need to give your money.
Empire's coming
We're
back.
waiting for the New
You need
Republic to
to give your
crumble, but
money.
give us your money. And they're kind of
We're
like,
waiting for
hey,
the New Republic to crumble,
your
but
protection isn't really
give us your
doing anything
money. And they're
for
kind of
us.
like, hey,
Like, why are we paying you?
your
And the
protection
guy's
isn't
like,
really
excuse
doing
me.
anything for
And
us. And
he
like,
just
why are
shoots
we
one of the
paying
guys.
you? And
He's
the
like,
guy's
yeah,
like,
we're
excuse
not
me.
doing this,
And he
right?
just
Like
shoots one of
I'm
the
from
guys.
the
He's like,
Empire.
yeah,
You're gonna do
we're
what I
not.
say. So like, but
I'm from the
anyway,
Empire. You're gonna do what I
as they're
say.
having
So,
this discussion,
but
and the guy
anyway,
just gets shot dead.
as they're
The
having this
base is under
discussion,
attack,
and
and
the
they're
guy
like,
just gets shot dead.
what?
The
And
base is
then my
under
dog
attack, and
Mando
they're like,
shows up. He's aura farming
what?
already. Comes in, he
And then
starts
my
shooting
dog
up the
Mando
place.
shows up. He's aura
He
farming
does his
already. He
thing.
comes in, he starts shooting
Um,
up the place.
and then the
He
guy
does
tries
his
to
thing.
escape. Barrow tries to escape. Barrow. I'm
and
just
the
gonna
guy
pronounce
tries
it
to
however I want
escape.
right now.
Barrow tries to
Barrow,
escape.
he
Barrow.
tries
I'm just gonna
escaping, and
pronounce
as
it
he
however
tries
I want right now.
escaping, there's
Barrow.
he
He
goes
tries
onto the
escaping, and
AT-AT
as he tries
walkers, and the
escaping,
Mandalorian and
he
Grogu
goes
are
onto
like
the AT-AT
rotato
walkers, and
chip.
the
No,
Mandalorian and
they
Grogu are
end up
like
chasing after him, and they take
rotato
down the
chip.
AT-AT
No.
walkers.
They end up
But then
chasing
Barrow
after
ends up
him, and they take
taking,
down the
kind of like an
AT-AT
escape
walkers.
pod off the
But then
AT-AT
Barrow
walker,
ends
which
up
is a really cool
taking,
thing. I've never
kind of
seen
like
that
an
in Star
escape
Wars
pod
before,
off the
besides this
AT-AT
film.
walker, which is a really
But
cool
then
thing. I've never
Mandalorian's
seen
like,
that in Star
nah,
Wars
potato
before,
chip, and he
besides this
shoots him.
film.
He's dead.
But then Mandalorian's
And
like, nah,
so
rotato chip, and
Mandalorian
he
and
shoots him.
Grogu,
He's
they get
dead.
picked up by Zeb,
So
who, if you have
Mandalorian and
not seen, he is
Grogu, they
from
get picked up
Star
by
Wars Rebels.
Zeb,
Really
who,
good show.
if you have
Definitely go
not
check that
seen,
out.
he
Who's
is
also
from
working for the New
Star Wars
Republic.
Rebels. Really good show.
Um,
Definitely go check that out. Who's also working for the New
Anyway,
Republic.
they pick him up. They go back to
Um,
the base that you did see at the
Anyway,
end of
they pick
season
him
three
up.
of
They go
Star
back
Wars.
to the base
Or
that
not,
you did
sorry,
see at the
of
end of season 3 of
Mandalorian and
Star
Grogu.
Wars,
There's nothing really big,
uh,
like huge about it. It's not like
Mandalorian and Grogu.
Yavin 4 or anything like that.
There's
It's just
nothing
like
really
a
big, like
base,
huge
like
about it.
on a
It's not
beach
like
side.
Yavin 4 or anything like that. It's
Basically,
just like a
once
base
they get back,
on a beach
you know,
side.
Mandalorian's like
Basically,
talking to
once
Sigourney
they get
Weaver's
back,
character, command
Mandalorian's like talking to
Colonel
Sigourney Weaver's
Ward, and
character.
she's kind of like, "Okay, Mando, where's the guy?" And he's like, "Oh no,
Kind of
he's dead."
like, okay, Mando, where's the guy? And he's like,
And
oh,
she's
okay.
like, "No, that's not how we run things here. You need to bring them in alive so that we can, question them about these imperial like sectors of the universe, right? Like we're trying to extinguish it. Not, we can't really extinguish anything if you just kill off our information." And Amanda's like, "I did your job. Chill out." But anyway, Sigourney Weaver's character is like, "All right, come with me." Because he doesn't like he's not a part of the New Republic, but he like works for them. Like they pay him to take out these people or like to bring them in because he is a bounty hunter or was. That's a discussion for later. But anyway, she walks him out and she basically just shows him basically the Razor Crest that is Mando's original ship that you see in the beginning of his show. Um, and everybody's just like, "What? His ship's back?" It's not really his ship. It's basically just like a new version of his ship. I think the way they bring this into the movie is really like I've heard some people online be like, "Oh, it's kind of like a shitty way to bring it in the movie." I actually didn't have an issue with it. Basically, the way she announces it, she's like, "Oh, we took down an ex-imperial officer that had a huge ship collection." I think that's a pretty smart way to bring it in. But basically, anyway, she like tells Mando, she's like, "Hey, this is your I won't say prize, but like this is what you basically get for taking out the ex imperial officer Amanda. That he notices he's like, hey, this is not really the average price of like my job. This is a little extra. What's up with that? And she gives him a new card, and she's like, yes, there is another officer we need you to look out for. His name is his name's not Lord Janu. It's the officer Janu. But basically, we need you to go look out for him or go check him out and like our tip is from the Huts, so definitely like the Hut crime family. And Mando's like no, and she's like okay, well I'm not gonna give you the ship, and he's kind of like oh sorry, but yeah. And Mandalorian's like I don't work for like the crime families anymore. He's like I'm a changed man. I don't do that. And she's like, "Well, we've been the New Republic's working with them. We have relations. They're gonna give us information." And Mandalorian's kind of like, And then basically Zeb's just kind of like, let's get on the ship. Let's just go check it out. Just go check it out, right? But so anyway, they end up going to Tal Hutta, which is the planet of the Huts, if you know anything about that. So once the Mandalorian gets there, he starts talking to the twins, who are two of the Hut what are they called? Slugs. So basically, I'm pretty sure they're the siblings of Jabba the Hutt, because Jabba the Hutt by now obviously is dead because Return of the Jedi. Leia chokes him out and kills him. But anyway, they have taken over the Hutt crime family, and they're talking to Mando. They're like, "I'll give you information on Janu," which I'm pretty sure is Janu. If you find our nephew, Rada, and they're like, and he's like, okay, well, where's Rada? And they're like, well, last time we saw him when he was a young kid was on a planet called Un Momento Shikari. Right. So they're like, he's on Shikari. You bring him back. We'll give you all the information you need. So Mandalorian's like, all right, bet. Goes to Shikari, and it's just really nice. Like, I don't want to say cyberpunk, but kind of. I don't know. The music is what like really gets you going. Like so shout out to Ludwig. He did an awesome job with the music and the soundtrack, which we'll get into in a minute. But basically, he ends up on this planet and he ends up talking to this character that is voiced by Martin Scorsese named Tico Durant. Um,
Cyberpunk,
I,
but
gue-
kind
I
of.
guess the way I'll
Uh,
describe this creature
the
is if you've
music
seen
is what like
Solo, the movie
really gets
Solo,
you going.
the creature that has
So
like
shout out to
multiple
Ludwig.
arms and like kind of
We'll get
flies the
into it in a
ship,
minute.
that's who this character looks like. But basically, this character, I'm just gonna call him Martin Scorsese's character.
I guess the way you
He's like
I would
kind of running
describe
like
this
a fast
creature
food
is if you've
joint,
seen Solo, the movie
but it's
Solo,
like a food
the
truck.
creature that has
And
like
so Mandalorian
multiple.
goes up to me, he's like, "Hey, I need information,"
He's like,
and he's kind of like, "Oh yeah, no problem, let me help you." He's like, "I'm
but
looking
it's
for a hut," and the
like a
guy's
food
like,
truck.
"Nope." Like
I need
the
information.
Martin Scorsese character is
And
very
he's
funny in
kind of
this
like, oh
film.
yeah, no
He doesn't
problem,
have
let
like
me
a
help you.
huge
He's like,
part, but it is like a pretty funny part, which
the
you'll
Martin
see a few
Scorsese character
times.
is very funny.
But he's like, "No, I'm looking for
Is like
Rod
a
of the
pretty
Hut," and
funny
the guy's like,
part,
"Oh."
which you'll see a few
He's like right
times.
there, and he's
But
pointing to
he's
a
like,
poster of Rod of the Hut, who is a
and the guy's like,
fighter on
oh.
this planet, like a gladiator type
He's
fighter.
pointing to a
So
poster of Rada the
basically,
Hutt, who is a
Mando
fighter
and
on this
Grogu they go
planet,
check
like a
out the fight.
gladiator type fighter.
he's doing
So
his thing, he's
basically,
killing the
Mando and
creatures, and
Grogu
he's
like
like,
check out the
you know,
fight.
he's
So
cheering with the
he's
crowd's
doing
going crazy, like, you know,
creatures,
like
and
they're
he's
doing their
you know
thing.
he's
But
cheering with the
basically,
crowd. The
after the
crowd's going
fight, I'm
crazy, like
guessing like when everybody
yeah, like
leaves
they're
or
doing
has
their thing.
left, you
But
know,
basically,
Rada
after
is
the
getting like
fight,
a
I'm guessing
massage and everything, you know, after the
has
fight, and Mando
left.
comes up to him, he's like,
You
"Hey,
know, Rada is getting like a
I'm
massage
going,"
and everything. You know,
and
after the
Rada's like,
fight, and
"No,
Mando
we're not."
comes up to him. He's like, "Hey,
And Mando's like, "What are you talking
we're
about? Like,
going."
you're kind of like,
And
you know,
Rada's
like a
like, "No,
slave.
we're
You're
not."
having to fight for the, you know,
Talking about
Janu."
like,
And Rod is like, "No, after tomorrow's fight, I will be free." He's like, "So I'm gonna, you know, do my own thing." And we kind of get into more of Rada's backstory here, where Rada kind of says, like, you know, I was given away at a very young age, obviously because you know Jabba
Jabba
the
the
Hutt
Hutt
got
got
killed,
killed,
but you know, kind of like his niece and nephew, no, sorry, his uncle, the twins, they kind of they kicked him out because you know obviously he would be the successor to the
kicked
family,
him
so they
out
didn't want him there,
because you know
and they
obviously
kind of were
he would be
expecting
the
him to like, kind of
successor to the
get
family, so they
killed
didn't want him there.
in the
And they kind of were expecting
in the
him to like kind of
gladiator
get
fights, but
killed.
obviously that didn't happen. And so everybody knows in the like in the universe of Star Wars knows who Jabba the Hutt is. They know he's
In
like
the
he was a
gladiator
pretty
fights.
crazy like crime boss. You know, he's pretty evil and
And
stuff like
so
that.
everybody knows
And
in
so that
the
kind of
universe
like
of Star Wars knows who
idea
Jabba
kind
the
of
Hutt is. They know
followed
he's like
Rada
he's a
when he was
pretty
growing up.
crazy like
But you
crime
know,
boss.
as
You know, he's
Rada was
pretty
growing up in this
evil and
gladiator
stuff like
pit, you know, he
that.
was doing his
And
thing, he was
so that
winning.
kind of like
He started winning over the
idea
crowd, and
kind of followed
they all were
Rada when
starting
he
to
was
cheer
growing up
for
because
Rada
as
for
Rada
like
was growing
what
up in
Rada
this
was doing, not
gladiator
because
pit,
of
you know,
like
he was doing his
what
thing,
you
he
know
was winning.
Jabba was doing. So that's why Rada's so ingrained with wanting to finish this out, right? And once he get his freedom, he loves that he's finally become kind of becoming his own person now. So that's kind of
He
like the
started winning over the
situation we got
crowd, and
going.
they
And
all were starting to
Mandalorian's
cheer
kind of like,
for Rada for like
but
what Rada
basically
was doing,
anyway,
not because of like what
when Rada
Jabba
name
was doing.
drops
So that's
Lord
why Rada's
Janu, Mandalorian's like, well, where can
wanting
I
to
find
finish this out,
Broski?
right? And once
And
he get his freedom,
he kind of like
becoming his own person now. So
says,
that's going
he's in charge.
kind of
I
like.
think I got that wrong. He kind of like
But
when
basically,
Rada
anyway,
tells him off, Mandalorian
when
goes
Rada name
back
drops
to
Lord
Martin
Janu,
Scorsese's character. He's like, "Hey, I
Mandalorian's
need
like,
more
well, where can I
information
find Broski?
on Lord Janu."
And
And the guy like starts tweaking out
and
again. He's like,
he
"Hey,
kind
I'm
of
not
like
going to tell you information," but
says,
basically ends up telling him where
he's in
because Lord
charge.
Janu is
I think
kind
I
of
got that wrong.
obviously like he's that ex Imperial officer we find out later in the film,
Basically ends up telling
but
him
he is kind of like a
where
huge,
because
not
Lord
only in
Janu
charge
is
of
kind of
the gladiator
obviously like
fights,
he's
but
that
he's like a huge
find out
kind
later
of
in the
like
film.
what's the
But
word?
he is kind of like a huge, not only in charge of the gladiator fights,
I want to say manager, but he
kind of
like
like
in charge of a
what's the
lot
word
of
I'm trying to think
areas.
of?
He kind of gives protection. So the person like Hugo, like
I want to say
Martin
manager, but he's
Scorsese's
like in
character, he has
charge
to
of a
pay
lot.
like a tribute to keep himself
The
safe and his
person like
family safe.
Hugo,
So Martin
has to
Scorsese's
pay like
character
a
is kind of like,
tribute to
hey,
keep
I don't really
himself
know where
safe
this
and his
guy
family
is, but I
safe.
do drops at
So
this one place occasionally.
Martin Scorsese's character is
And
kind
so
of
he
like,
ends up
hey,
giving that information
I don't really
to
know where this guy
Mando, and then Mando's like,
this
okay,
one place
Mando go
occasionally.
checks out this place that
And so he ends
Martin
up giving that
Scorsese
information to
characters talks about, and he comes up to the Dugs that are in this place. He's like, hey, I'm looking for Lord Janu, and the guy's like, he's not here. And so they get into a fight, which is really cool. And then is he like it's like one of the characters from Star Wars that has horns on his head, and like Mandalorian. Okay, this guy is nasty because he just like breaks the crap out of his horn, and the guy's flabbergasted. He's like dead ass. He's flabbergasted, and then Lauren Johnny shows up. He's like, "Hey, everybody chill out, right?" And he brings in Mandalorian. He kind of like bitch slaps, like he doesn't like physically, but he like verbally to his like his underling, like the one with the horns that just got like broken off. He's like, "Hey, kind of clean up this mess," and you're kind of like, "Damn." But anyway, Lord Johnny brings in the Mandalorian to the back, and the Mandalorian's like, "All right, give me Rada." And John is like, "What are you talking about? That shit is not happening." He's like, he's got one more fight, and it's gonna be amazing, right? It's gonna be spectacular. And the Mandalorian's like, okay, well, I'll pay the rest of his whatever the rest of his contract or whatever. And Lord Johnny's like, oh no, you think he's leaving? Yeah, that's not happening. I just lied to Rada, you know. And the Mandalorian's like, what do you mean? Well, he's like, oh, well, I brought in like all these creatures.
He's
Like
not
I
here.
forgot what the name of the
And
fight
so
is,
they
but he's
get
like, I brought in all these creatures. Yeah, this guy's not leaving, right? He's not leaving alive.
and then
And then Mandalorian's kind of like he's kind of like
it's
what?
like one of the
And
characters from
Lord
Star
Johnny's
Wars that
like
has
yeah,
horns on his head.
and then
And
Lord
like
Johnny's
Mando,
kind of like well you're a Mandalorian
this
yourself.
guy is
You're
maybe
kind of rare. Would you like to join the pits?
just lied to
And
Rada.
Mando's like no. What
He's
the
like, what do you
fuck?
mean?
He's like
Well, he's like,
no.
oh, well, I brought in like all
And
these I forgot what the
John
name
is
of the
like
fight was.
okay
He's like,
well
I brought in
think
all these
about it. Get
creatures.
back to me.
Yeah, this guy's not
And
leaving. Like
Mandalorian's like
he's not
okay
leaving that
whatever.
alive.
And so Mandalorian ends up leaving. He's like you know what?
He's kind of like what?
He's like talking to Grogu. He's like, I guess we're gonna have to
He's
go
like, okay, well,
rescue
think about
Rada.
it.
After Rada's already told him no.
And
So they go
Mandalorian's like,
back to
okay,
the like
whatever.
where
And
Rada
so
is, where
Mandalorian
Rada's
ends up
sleeping
leaving.
in his
He's like, you know
cell.
what?
and they're like,
He's like talking to Grogu. He's like, I guess we're gonna
"Rada,
have to go
wait a
rescue Rada,
And Rada
after Rada fights
instantly,
Mandalorian.
Rada's like,
So
"Yeah,
they
hey
go back to
guards,
the
yeah,
back where Rada
like
is, where
the man,
Rada's
he's
sleeping.
back."
So
And so anyway, he gets knocked
anyway, he
out,
gets knocked
and
out,
Mandalorian finds
and
himself
Mandalorian
waking
finds
up
himself waking
in the
up
ring,
in the
and he's
ring,
fighting
and he's
Rada
fighting
like
Rada
instantly.
like
It's the next
instantly.
day, I
It's
guess. And Mandalorian kind of like does a bunch of defensive maneuvers because Rada's like really huge. He's like a really buff, creature. Because like Jabba the Hutt's like a big slug, but he's like fat. Rada's super buff. Like you see it in the trailers, which is really cool to see. Like a Hutt that's buff as fuck. So I don't know. I thought this was cool. But anyway, like this guy's fast. He's doing some crazy moves. He's swinging his axes, and basically him and Mando are going back and forth. And Mando's like, "Bro, I'm not gonna kill you." And that's when he kind of breaks the news. He's kind of like, "Hey, Lord Janu's not gonna let you escape, right? He's got this whole plan. You're not leaving." And what's it called? Rod is kind of like, "No, no, what are you talking about? You're just trolling. Like, quit trolling." And then basically, Mandalorian, he kind of just like puts his hands up. He's like, "Hey, I'm not killing him." And Lord Johnny's like, "All right, fuck it, right? If you're not gonna kill him, somebody will." So he opens up like all the cages, and all those monsters come out, and everybody's like, "Yeah!" And, like everybody's going ape shit, and that's kind of like when I would say like Rada kind of realizes that like the fans didn't really like him. They just like seeing somebody win, like seeing the fight go on. They didn't really give a crap about Rada. And so Mandalorian and Rada, they team up together, and they start fighting the monsters. And a really cool part about this fight is all the monsters that the guy collected are the same monsters that are on like the digital chess. Well, I want to call it chess, but whatever it's called, the chess type board that Chewbacca and Han play. So that's a really cool like Easter egg that's in this movie. Like it's the exact same creatures. But anyway, they start fighting the creatures. They start putting some belts of ass. And then one of the creatures, who's like an electric creature, he gets like thrown into like one of the laser like walls. I won't call it a wall, but like basically like got rails, and basically he sorts it out, and then all the monsters escape. Everybody's like, like the fuck, like that's big ass monsters in there, they're pretty deadly. So in this time, Mando makes his escape, but before he makes his escape, he ends up finding Grogu, because obviously him and Grogu went to go capture Rada, and then they got captured. Because Grogu was like in a little like I want to call it cell, but he's like in a little like cage, kind of like a bird, with Janu, and then so like when everybody escapes and Janu like runs away, he ends up grabbing Grogu, and he's relieved to find him. He's relieved to have save him. Basically, as they're leaving, Rada takes like a little like car. He's like, "Fuck it, bro. Like I can't go back to my family. Like, nah, bro." And he tries driving off, but then the Mandalorian like stops him. He cuts him off, like he's chasing him, and then like Zeb shows up on his ship in
and he
front of
tries
him,
driving
and he
off,
kind
but
of
then
gets cornered, I
Mandalorian
would
like
say,
stops him,
and
and
he's
he
kind of
cuts
like,
him off,
whatever, I
like
give
he's
up,
chasing him,
right? And so as they're on their
shows
way
up on his
back
ship
to
in
the
front of
hut,
him, and he kind of gets cornered, I would say,
Rada's talking to
and
Mando. He's like, "Hey, like, please don't send me back to my family. You know that like the moment I get there, they're just gonna kill me." He's like, "I don't want to go back there." And Mando's like, "Why would I believe you?" And you know, and then Rada's kind of like, if you really want to go catch Lord John, like now is the time, right? Like he's gonna go back to his base. Like other than that, you're probably never gonna see him again. And Mandel and like Rhonda's like, I know where it is. He's taken me there before. And that's when Mando's kind of like again, like why should I believe you? And Rhonda tells him, he's like, you're a bounty hunter. If I like somebody's bullshitting you. And so Mando kind of takes their men, and he's like, all right, whatever. And so they end up going to Lord Jondu's base, and they end up finding a bunch of stormtroopers and everything there, and they end up like shooting up the guns, blowing up the place. They don't blow up the place. I just meant that as like term. But end up going in there, and they end up grabbing Lord Janu. I would say in this movie, the action is really awesome. Like the choreography is just really like top notch, especially from Zev or Rada or Mando. Like each of their characters have their own type of fighting, and it's really well done. Like you can tell, like Zeb fights like Zeb or Rada fights like Rada, stuff like that, and it's really cool. So they end up grabbing Lord Janu, and they're like, you know, uh, trying to like rush back to the freaking ship. They got all the stormtroopers chasing them, firing at them, and they end up getting back on the ship and everything. And they're headed back to the New Republic area. And what's it called? Mando ends up bringing in the ex Imperial officer Lord Janu, and then he meets Sigourney Weaver's character, Colonel Ward, and she's like, "Hey, you're supposed to bring Rada back to the huts, not bring me straight Johnny." And Mandalorian's like, "All right." He's like, "I brought you the big fish. Like, let's chill out." And she's like, "Well, you've kind of fucked us over, right? Like we've been building this relationship with the huts, and you just kind of like spit in their face." And Mandalorian's kind of like, "Not my issue. Like, I bet you the big fish. Let's calm the fuck down." And she's basically like, "All right, whatever you want to do." And Mandalorian's like, "Hey, I'm gonna take a break. I'm gonna pump the brakes. I'm gonna kind of take a break from doing like keep searching for the officers." And she's like, "All right, well, you do you." And so basically, Mandalorian, Wada, and Grogu, they go back to I think it's on the same planet. They end up going back to his house, and they're chilling there. Mandalorian's working on his ship, and that's when we meet some of the Babu Frick characters. They're pretty funny from Rise of Skywalker. Them and Grogu, they're working on the ship, and that's when Mandalorian talks to Rada. He's like, "Hey, I found this droid gun smuggler that get you off planet, take you wherever you want to." And Ryder's like, "Oh, thank you. No, I appreciate that." He's like, "Take care of, Grogu. He's a good kid. Stuff like that." They end up saying their goodbyes, and then as the night progresses, then Mandalorian, it's nighttime. Mandalorian, Babu Frick, all the little creatures, and Grogu are in their house, and they end up getting attacked by Embo, who is a bounty hunter in Star Wars. If you don't know who that is, he's like the guy with like the big like circular hat. He's really cool. I've seen him in Clone Wars a lot of times, so he's really awesome. And it's the first time seeing him, I'm pretty sure, in live action, if I'm not mistaken. Let me fact check that. Uh, okay, yeah, I was right. I was right. Anyway, Imbo ends up attacking Mandalorian at his house, but right before he can attack him, Mandalorian tells the little Boba Frick creatures and Grogu, he's like, "Hey, like you need to get out of here before this, like, before shit goes down." They end up escaping, and then Mandalorian,
When I
he's
go
doing his
past the
thing,
Lord
he's
Jedi,
fighting.
there's
Again,
mentors
choreography is
that's
amazing. CGI is really amazing too. I'll get into that in a minute.
Imbo
They
ends
end
up
up keep
attacking
fighting,
Mandalorian at his
and then
house, but right before he
as
can
Mandalorian
attack
tries
him,
to escape, he
Mandalorian
ends up like
tells the little
electrocuted,
Boba Frick
and he gets
creatures and Grogu. He's
captured.
like, "Hey, like, you need to
And
get out of
so
here before
Imbo
this,
ends up
like,
taking him
before
off,
shit goes
and then
down."
we cut
They end
to
up escaping, and then Mandalorian,
Grogu.
he's
Kind of
doing
like the
his
next
thing,
day
he's
or
fighting.
two.
Again, choreography is
Grogu
amazing.
ends up, with the Boba Fricks, they end up like
CGI is really
suiting
good
up,
too.
and
It's very good.
it's a really cool scene
They
because
end up keep
the
fighting,
Mandalorian.
and then
I mean, not
as
Mandalorian.
Mandalorian
Grogu
tries
gets
to
his like
escape,
gear on
he
that
ends up
Mando gave him. His
electrocuted,
gun,
and
his
he
like
gets
little uh,
captured. And
armor in
so
the front,
Imbo
and
ends up
everything.
taking
They
him off,
and they all like
and
load
then we
up.
cut
Man,
to
Grogu looks pretty fucking badass. Dude,
Grogu,
he's like
kind of
walking like
gets
slow mo
walking
walking to
to
the
the
ship,
ship,
which with
with
the
the
Boba
Bobby
Fricks,
Fricks,
and
and
they
they
take
take
off.
off.
And then basically Embo and Mandalorian, they arrive at Tal Hutta again, and he
Embo
kind of
and
brings them in front
Mandalorian,
of
they
them,
arrive at Tal Hutta again,
and
and he kind of brings
they're
them in front of
talking,
them.
and the Hutts take off Mando's helmet. They're like, "Ha, I disgraced you again." And they're like, "Why the fuck?" Like they're like, "Why the
The
shit
Huts
did you
take
just
off
fucking
Mando's
like lie
helmet. They're
to
like,
us?
I
Not
disgraced
drop
you
off
again.
the our
And they're like,
nephew." And
why the fuck?
they
Like they're
point
like,
over to the
why the
side, and
shit
like
did you
Rada's
just
like all
fucking like
chained up. I
lie
wouldn't
to
say chained
us?
up. He's like in
Not
like an
drop off
electric chair type
our
situation. Like
nephew. And
I would say
they
kind of in
they
a
point
coma.
over to
I
the
don't know.
side,
I don't
and
really know the
Rada's like
science
all
of it,
chained. I would
but
say
he's kind of like
he's like
over
in
there
like an
off to the
electric chair
side,
type
and
situation.
Mandalorian's kind of like,
I would say kind of in a
what?
coma. I don't know. Can't really know
But yeah,
science
they're
of it.
like,
But he's kind of
you
like over
disgraced us, so
to
now
the
you're gonna
side,
pay.
and
So they end
Mandalorian's
up
going,
doing a Jabba
what?
move, which they press a
But yeah,
button, and
they're
he
like,
falls through
you disgraced
the
us, so now you're
ground,
gonna pay. So they end up doing
and
a
he's in this
Jabba
huge
move,
like
which they
water
press a
pit
button
area,
and he falls to
and he's getting attacked by
the
these water
ground,
creatures. Like they're
and he's
the
in
way
this huge
I
like
think of them, they're kind of
water
like
pit
leeches, but like
area,
really
and
fucking
he's getting
huge
attacked by these
leeches.
water.
And so Mandalorian's attacking them, and he's kind of
The
like,
way I think of them, they're kind of like
"Oof,
leeches, but
we
like
got through
really
that."
fucking
And then
huge leeches.
they give him the
So
helmet. They're like,
Mandalorian's attacking
"Here's
them, and
your
he's kind of
reward."
like,
They give him the helmet, but it kind of gets like stuff off to the
we got
side.
through that.
And then
And
this
then
big ass
they give
fucking
him the
like
helmet, and they're
water
like,
python just
here's your
shows up. Like
reward.
that's not
They
what
give
it
him the
is,
helmet, but
obviously.
it
But
kind of gets like
that's
stuff
kind of like
off
the
to the
easy way
side.
to describe
And
it.
then this
This
big
huge like
ass
white
fucking like
water like
water
creature,
python
and
just
he's
shows
like it's
up. Like that's not
fucking
what it is, obviously,
humongous.
but that's kind of like
And
the
the
easy
Huts
way
are
to
kind of like,
describe it.
"Hey,
This
if it
huge like
bites you,
white
like
water
you're
like
fucked."
creature, and
Because
he's
it's
fucking
poisonous. And
humongous.
so Mandalorian kind of
And the
does this
Huts are kind
thing,
of like,
kind of like,
hey, if it bites you, like
is
you're
attacking it.
fucked.
And at the same
Because it's
time, the Babu
poisonous.
Fricks and
And so
Grogu, they
Mandalorian
arrive on
kind of
Tal
does this
Hutta.
thing, kind of like
They sneak in.
is attacking it.
Mandalorian
And at the
finally gets
same
his helmet. He
time,
starts
the
putting some
Babu
belts of
Fricks and
ass on the
Grogu
creature,
they
and then he
arrive on Tal
sees
Hutta. They
Grogu
sneak
kind of like
in.
near the drain, and
Mandalorian
Grogu's like,
finally
"Hey,
gets his helmet,
what's
starts
up,
putting some
Dad?"
belts of ass on the
And he puts
creature,
a
and then he
bomb there,
sees
and Grogu's just kind of chilling there.
Grogu's kind of like near the
And
drain,
Mando's like, "What the fuck are you
and
doing? Get
Grogu's
the
like,
fuck out of
"Hey,"
the way! You're gonna blow yourself up."
and he puts a
And
bomb there,
so
and
Grogu ends up
Grogu's just kind
blowing
of
up
chilling there.
like
He's
the drain
Mando's like, "What the
area,
fuck are you
and
doing? Get
Mando
the
is
fuck
able to
out of the way!
escape.
You're gonna blow
And as they're getting
And
out,
so
obviously the
Grogu ends
Hutts are
up
like,
blowing
what
up
the
like
fuck is
the
going on?
Drake
So they send out
area,
all the
and they're
droids because
letting
they have a
everyone
bunch of
escape.
droids, like
And
repurposed
as they're
droids
getting
from the
out,
Clone Wars
obviously the
era,
Hutts are
like all
what the
sorts of
fuck is
droids.
going on? So they
They
send
send
out
them
all
out
the
to like
droids
go
because they have a
find
bunch of
Mando. Like
droids, like
we're
repurposed
not doing
droids from the
this.
Clone Wars era,
And so
like
anyway,
all sorts of
they end
droids.
up running away,
They send
and
them out to like
Grogu,
go
Mando, and the
find
Baba
Mando.
Fricks they
Like
end up running away, and
we're
then they
not
get
doing
back to
this.
the ship.
And so
Okay,
anyway,
I
they
didn't
end up running.
explain this, but the ship that the
The
Baba
Baba Fricks
Fricks
end
and
up running.
Grogu go on is like a tiny ass ship.
Okay,
Like
I didn't explain this, but the
nah,
ship that
what's a
the Baba
I don't have
Fricks and
I don't
Grogu
have a
go
good
on is like a
reference, but like
tiny
kind
ass
of
ship.
like a notebook size, like length
What's
or
a?
something like that. But it's like
I don't have a good
it's
reference.
not crazy big. Like Mando, like Grogu's not that
Length
big
or
because you can
something
see
like
back
that, but
there.
it's
So
like
maybe like
it's not
something like
crazy
that
big.
big.
Like
You get what I'm
Like
saying. It's a tiny
Grogu's
ship,
not that
and like
big because you can
it's
see
kind of
back
a
there. So
funny
maybe
moment,
like
but not really. It's kind of a
something
sad
like
moment
that.
because like
You
they
get what
all
I'm saying.
get
It's a
there. The
tiny
Baba
ship,
Freaks are
and like
running there.
it's kind of a funny
Everybody's
moment, but
happy
not
that
really. It's kind
they
of a
got
sad moment because like they all get
Mandalorian
there. The
about to
Baba
run
Freaks
away,
are running there.
and
Everybody's
Mandalorian's kind of
happy.
gagged. He's
They
kind of like.
got
He's like, I don't
Mandalorian
fit in
about to
that.
run
But
away.
anyway, he's kind
And
of like,
Mandalorian's
he
kind
tells
of
Grogu, he's
gagged.
like,
He's
hey,
kind of like,
yeah, thank you for
he's like, I
saving
don't
me,
fit in
but I
that.
can't go with you. I don't fit
Anyway,
in
he's kind
that.
of like,
He's like, you
he
need to
tells
go
Grogu,
though.
he's
You
like,
need to
hey,
be safe.
thank you for saving me, but I can't go with you. I don't
And
fit in that.
so they
He's
end
like,
up,
you need to go. You
he's
need to
like,
be safe.
you got to get out of here. I'll buy you some time. I'll shoot at the
And
droids or
so they
whatever.
end up,
And
he's
so
like, you gotta get
Mando
out of here.
goes off on
I'll
his
buy you some
own. And he
time. I'll
starts
shoot at
shooting,
the droids or
attacking the
whatever.
droids. But
And
something I
so
forgot to mention is
Mando
right
goes
before
off on his
he
own and
got
he
to
starts shooting,
escape when
attacking the
Grogu put the
droids.
bomb
But
on, he
something
actually
I
got
forgot to mention
bit
is
by
right
the
before
water python. So he
he
has
got to
poison running through
escape
his body,
when
and
Grogu put the
kind of
bomb on, he actually got
getting
bit
weak,
by
stuff like that.
the water python. So he has
Anyway,
poison running through his body, and
as he's
he's
attacking, he finally like kind of finds
getting
himself
weak,
at a safe
stuff like that.
point. But then all these robots
Anyway,
start closing in on him, and then
as he's
Grogu kind
attacking, he
of
finally
saves
like
the
kind of
day.
finds himself
And
at a
it's kind of
safe
like the moment, like,
point.
oh,
But then
Grogu
all these
didn't leave.
robots
He
start
did
closing in
save
on
me.
him,
But
and
anyway,
Grogu
Mando
kind of saves
passes
the
out,
day.
and then Grogu
It's
kind
kind
of
of like the
put
moment,
like
like, oh,
like he
Grogu didn't
starts to
leave,
take
and he
care of
did
him.
save me.
Kind of
But
puts him like in
anyway,
this kind of
Mando
tiny little
passes
mud
out, and
hut,
then Grogu kind
trying
of
to
put
hide
like
him from any
starts to
droids that are
take
still
care of
searching
him,
the area.
kind of puts him like
And
in
there's
this
a
kind
kind
of
of funny
tiny little
gag
mud
where
hut, trying to hide him from any droids
to
that are
me
still
it looks
searching the
like
area.
Yoda's
And
hut,
there's
which
a kind of
obviously
funny
intentional.
gags where
But he
to me
makes
it
the
looks like
hut, and then he like
Yoda's hut,
tries
which
to
is
force
obviously
push him in
intentional,
there,
but
but he doesn't make the hut big enough,
he
and so
makes
like
the
you just hear
hut,
like
and
the
then he like
clink of
tries
his
to force
helmet as his
push him
feet
in
are
there.
sticking out, and so
And so like you just
Grogu's
hear
like,
like
all right,
the
let me try
clink of
again.
his
He's like,
helmet as
clink,
his feet are sticking
and
out, and so
he tries like 2 or 3 more times, it just doesn't
Grogu's
work.
like, all right, let me try
So
again.
Grogu's like, all right, whatever. He starts putting some
He tries like two
what's
or
it
three more
called?
times, it just doesn't work. So
Some
Grogu's
leaves
like,
or
all right, whatever.
shrubbery,
He starts putting
over his
some
feet. He
what's it
hides
called?
it. He ends up peeling
Some leaves or
the
shrubbery
wound,
over
like
his
the
feet. Yeah, he
physical
hides
wound
it.
on
He ends
Mando,
up
but
peeling
either he
the
doesn't
wound,
know or he
the
doesn't know how
physical wound
to
on Mando, but
take the poison out of
either
his
he
system, so
doesn't
he's still
know
like
or he doesn't know
slowly
how
dying.
to
But
take the
anyway,
poison out of his system,
as
so he's
Grogu's
still
taking
like
care of
slowly dying.
Mando, he ends up coming
But
across
anyway,
like this water creature because it's like a swamp
coming
planet,
across like
Talhutta. The water
because it's
teacher,
like a swamp,
not teacher, creature is named
not teacher. Creature is named
Gatori, or
Get
I think the
Gatori, or
yeah,
I think
Gatori. I don't know correct
Gatori. I don't
pronunciation, but anyway,
pronunciation.
he ends up
But anyway,
running into this creature. He doesn't like say
running
anything to him right away. He
say
ends up
anything
just
to him right
stealing
away.
his
He ends up
food.
just
But
stealing his
eventually he
food.
runs into him
But
because he's being
eventually he
attacked
runs
by
into
this
him
like
because he's being
toad.
attacked
But
by this like
anyway,
toad. But
Gatori,
Gatori,
as he's talking to him, then Embo shows up, and so Grogu has to go hide away real quick, and Embo, starts talking to him, and then Embo, goes back to the huts. He's still looking for Mando and Grogu, and then you know, a plot armor real quick shows up, and Gatori's like, wait, you're the guy that is with the Mandalorian who got bit by the snake that is poisoned? I gotcha. Let me get you the poison remedy. And he's kind of like, okay, here's the poison remedy. Go give it to Dinjar, or go give it to Mandalorian. And he's like, it might not work, so do be careful. Do keep that in mind. But basically, here it is. Good luck, broski. So basically, then Grogu grabs the. It's not a serum. It's kind of like, I don't know. It's like a pill or whatever. He gives it back to Din Djarin, and he's kind of like he's not really sure if it works because like the Mandalorian doesn't move or anything. He's just kind of like passed out there still. So it's a really cute scene. Grogu just kind of like ends up getting himself all up in Mando's arm. He's like takes it out. He's going to sleep. He's kind of hoping for the best. Like maybe in the morning everything will fix itself. And then he wakes up and the Mandalorian's just gone. Grogu's like, "The fuck?" And he ends up finding that Mando's right outside, and Mando's like, "Thanks for saving me." And they're happy to be with each other, and they're like, "All right, two things: either we get off the planet and they keep finding us. There's only so much time that we're gonna be safe. And until they find us again, or we just go guns a blazing, right? We just fucking blow this shit up." And as we're talking about it, Mandalorian's like, all right, well, if we're gonna do that, right? Well, how are we gonna do that? Like, we don't have any gear, we don't have a ship or anything. And then they ironically find the robot gun runner ship. It's like right over there. And obviously, since he's the gun runner, he has all the gear and everything. So when they get over there, obviously those like leech creatures are back because they're in a swamp area. Mando puts some belt to ass, but then they suit up. You know, you get the knives, you got the guns, you got the iconic Mando sniper rifle or whatever. And they go and they end up picking up the ship because I guess the ship still works. And instead of like maybe like shooting a few people to get into the door, no, Mando just says fuck it. He goes like straight in. He's like crashes the ship into like I don't know what the fortress is called. Like it's just like a giant like gross metamorphosis egg type area. I don't know. It's gross. He ends up just like crashing that shit in there, and he just starts going like guns and blades. And he starts shooting people up, and then he ends up getting on top of like one of these speeders. I I don't want to say speeder, but kind of like it's like a standing speeder. Like if you've seen the Phantom Menace, like what the droids are using on Naboo, it's kind of the same thing. So he ends up using that, and he like rushes to where
Has to go hide
the
behind
huts
Embo,
are.
and Embo,
But
starts like
right outside of where
and
the
then
twins
Embo
are, like
running
right
back.
outside of their room, are these two big robots, like big ass robots,
He still does
and
it
they
because
have
he's like
guns, you have the grenades
using
and everything.
Grogu, and then
Man, it's kind of like fuck. But anyway, him and Grogu end up taking
plot
down the
armor real
robots
quick
after a
shows
minute,
up,
and the
and
fighting here again really really cool.
the
And so he
huts
ended
are
up getting in
like
there,
right
and
outside of where the
Grogu noted,
twins are, like
Mando's
right
like, "Hey,
outside of
Grogu,
their
go
room.
get Roddy,
There's
let's go
two
save him."
big
And so
robots, like
Mandalorian,
big ass
pulls out
robots,
his rifle. He's like, "All
and they
right,
have
guys, you
guns,
took
they
all
have
my
grenades and
helmets,
everything.
by the rules of
He has
Mandalorian, I have
guns.
to kill you guys. Obviously on top of
But
everything
anyway,
else that is happening, he's gonna kill them. And then Embo shows up, kind of like throws his fucking helmet like Captain America, and obviously this guy doesn't really say a lot. And, they start fighting and start doing their thing again. Really, really cool. Um, everybody has their own kind of fighting style, especially Embo with his hat and everything. He like drops it, like blocks a blaster, puts it back. It's really cool. So they start fighting, and then as Grogu is trying to help Rada get out of the containment, whatever he's in, like the coma inducer, the twins start showing up, and they're nasty. They're really nasty, like, ugh. But anyway, and then like just magically, right before Grogu gets eaten by the twins, Rada wakes up and he starts putting belt to ass. Right, he starts attacking these slugs, the twins. I guess his aunt and uncle. I don't know, one of the two. Um, but like as he's doing it, it's kind of funny because they're like fat slugs, but then Rada's like this big ass buff slug from the gladiator ring, and he just like starts beating the fuck out of them. So you got like the two fights going on, but as Rada and the twins are fighting, they're kind of fighting over like the opening where Mando got dropped down, but obviously it's closed. Um, but as they're fighting, he's like slamming the ground and whatever. It's causing the kind of like the door to open more. And so, they kind of get to a point. I think like Mando kicks Embo or whatever to the kind of kicks him to where, he kind of falls back onto the slugs. And basically, after a whole like bunch of like fighting, because like the way they fight is kind of like rolling, so it's a lot of pressure on top of that. It ends up like falling down, and everybody's like, "Oh no," right? But Grogu and Mando don't. But Rada does. He falls down with him. But then like he kind of like gets suspended into the air, and you're kind of like, "What?" And it's the force moment. Grogu like ends up picking him up, and he puts him off to the side, and they're like, "Oh, we all saved each other." Like, yeah. And then you hear like bang, bang, bang. You're like, "What the fuck is this huge banging on the doors for?" And he's like one of the robots coming back, and you're kind of like, right, because you still got all the droids there, still not got the rest of the like huge, because it's a huge place that they're in where the huts are in, and yeah, they start shooting, and Mando's like, "Hey, Rod, is there a place to get out of here?" And they're like, "Yeah, I think we go in the back." So he's like, get Grogu out of here." And they're like, "Well, what are you gonna do?" He's like, "I'm gonna buy some time." So as like the doors kind of like the huge robots opening the door and letting some of the droids in, I'm gonna start shooting people. He starts shooting the big ass robot, and then at that time you hear like like his mic's going off. You hear the Boba Fett creatures, because again remember they left when Grogu was initially supposed to leave Tal Hutta when he saved Mando, and they came back and they ended up bringing a lot of the New Republic officers like Colonel Ward, Sigourney Weaver's character. And they come in, guns ablazing with the Y fighters. And, Mandalorian's like, "Hey, I need you to blow up my coordinates." And she's like, "Okay, I'm not doing that, bro. I'm not going to kill you." And he's like, "No, no, no, trust me. Like, I'll make it out in time. I just need you to blow up my coordinates." Because, all the robots are coming rushing in. So Mandalorian's like shooting a few. And they end up running back to where Rada and Grogu are. And they're like, "Hey, it's kind of a closed, it's a wall. We're not really getting out of here." Mando's like, "Hold on a minute." He like pulls out the sniper rifle, just blows out this huge fucking hole in the wall, and it's this huge swamp below. And Mando's like, "Hey, we gotta jump." And Rada's like, "I'm not fucking jumping. The fuck?" He's like, "You don't know how deep that water is. Like, it's kind of a far jump." And Mando's like, "All right, we had to jump. Your ass getting blown up
All right, we had to
because
jump. Your
the
ass
huge
getting blown
ass
up.
fighters, and they're all coming in. And like right as they jump, we're like, "All right, we're about to bomb this place. Like 3, 2, 1, boom!" And the whole place blows up. They jump
All
just
right,
in time, and they end up being saved by Zeb. Zeb's like, "Hey, why do I gotta keep picking your asses up?" But anyway, they end up going back real quick. I think I forgot to mention this. Right before it gets blown up, you see that huge white snake python, whatever it's called, that was in the pit that was attacking Mando. It ends up eating both the twins, and you're kind of like, right? It's kind of funny. But and then at that same time, Imbo ends up making his escape. So it's kind of like the slithery like bounty hunter that doesn't really like if the job's over, like there's no point for me to stay. Right? There's no loyalty here. You get the memo. Anyway, they get back to
eating both
the New
the
Republic
twins, and you're
base,
kind of like,
and
right? It's kind of funny. And
Sigourney
then
Weaver
at that
character
same
is like,
time,
"Hey,
Imbo ends up
you're
making
right, because Mandalorian
Republic
pointed out
base,
to them that because
and
Rada said it earlier. He's like, the
course,
Hutts don't care about
you were
like the
right,
New Republic.
because
They're
maybe
working with the Empire.
them,
The
and
only
because
reason that
Rada
they're
said it
working,
earlier,
they're
he's like,
helping
the Hutts
the New
don't care
Republic is
about
so they can get
the New
information to
Republic.
sell
They're
them out
working
to
with
the
the
Empire,
Empire. The
right?
only
Because
reason that they're
obviously there's still
working,
those
they're
small
helping
sectors of the
the
Empire,
New
and
Republic is
so
so
when
they
they
can get
come
information to
back
sell them
at the end
out
of the
to
film,
the
like
Empire.
now,
Right? Because
Sigourney Weaver's
obviously
character
there's
is
still
like,
those
"Hey, you were
small
right.
sectors of the
Like
Empire.
we shouldn't have been
And
working
so
with
when
the
they come
Hutts. So
back
thank you.
at the end of the
I
film,
should have
like
trusted
now,
you." And
Sigourney
Mandalorian's like,
Weaver's character is like, hey,
"No,
you
you
were
Gucci.
right.
Don't worry
You
about it.
shouldn't have
Don't
been
worry
working
about it."
with the Hutts. So
And then
thank
Mandalorian
you.
goes up to
I
Rada.
should have
He's like,
trusted
"Hey, do you
you.
need me to drop you
And
off
Mandalorian's like,
anywhere? What's the situation?" And Rada's
don't
like,
worry about it.
"No,
Don't worry
I
about
think
it.
I'll actually stay
And
here
then Mandal
and work with the New Republic."
I think I'll
And
actually
Zeb's like,
stay
"All right,
here
I got you,
and work
Borsky."
with the.
But anyway, he kind of says his goodbye to Grogu. He's like, "Hey, like take care of Mando. He's a good one. He's a good dad." And Mando and Grogu take off, and they're about to enter hyperspace. And Mando's like, "Hey, Grogu, like get up in the pilot seat with me." He's like, "You set us off." And so Grogu ends up pressing the hyperspace button, and and like da 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 da. Okay, that was terrible singing, but you get what I mean. That was the end of the movie. Roll the blue credits. But yeah, so that's the whole like story, basically, give or take. Like the whole events that happened, and it was a really good film. It was a really good film, I will say. Um, it's very action packed. There's funny moments. Like I said, the action's really good. The CGI is really good. The story, it's not a crazy story. Like I said, it's not like Jedi won and Sith won. You're gonna fight it out. The war is coming. It's about to break. There's a huge star killing machine. Like it's nothing like that. It's a very small story. But yeah, speaking of story, more focused on like, cause
Man, goes
remember,
like, hey,
we're getting
Grogu,
into like my favorite part of the review, which is kind of like themes.
he's like,
There are a
you
lot of good
fight
themes
it
in this
out.
movie. Like obviously, a
The
lot of them
war
can
is
be
coming. It's
taken
about to
from
break. There's a huge
the
star killing
Mandalorian
machine. Like
show.
it's
Like
nothing like that. It's a
obviously,
very
like
small
the same
story.
idea. Like the writing can be
But
taken
yeah.
away. Like we're going from point
Speaking of
A to point
story,
B. We go to point B. We solve
more focused
problem
on like,
C.
cause
But once
remember,
we're finished
we'll
with
get
problem
into
B,
like
we get back to
my
point
part,
A.
my
But
favorite
there's
part of
something
the
else
review, which is
stopping
kind
us
of
from
like
completing
themes.
point A. So we
There
gotta
are a
go to
lot of
planet
good themes
D.
in this
You
movie.
get the
Obviously, a
situation.
lot of them can be
Along
taken
the way, so,
from
somebody
the
gets caught, so we got to
Mandalorian
go save
show.
him,
Like
and then we come
obviously,
back to
like the
point A.
same
Like
idea. Like the
it's very
writing can be taken away.
formulaic.
Like
It's
we're
a
going
part
from
of the,
point A
it's
to
just a part of
point
the
B.
story, and it's kind of the
We
same
go to
thing
point
here.
B. We solve problem
I will
C.
say that I
Once
did
we're
read
finished with
online that
problem
this
B,
movie
we
was
get back
supposed
to
to be
point
season
A. But
four,
there's something
but
else
due I
stopping
think I
us
think it
from
was the writer's
completing point
strike.
A. So we gotta
Due
go
to
to
the writer's
point
strike,
D.
they couldn't
You
really,
get the situation.
they
Oh,
didn't have
the
the money or
person.
the resources.
Somebody gets
So Jean
caught. So we gotta go
Favreau
save
and Dave
him,
Filoni
and
they
then we
kind of
go
like
back to point
rewrote
A.
it
Like
a little
it's
bit
very
into a movie. That
formulaic.
way it
It's a part
worked.
of the it's a part
So
of the
yeah,
story,
some of the
but it's
issues
kind of
we
the
will
same
talk
idea
about
here.
the film later do kind of like
I
come
will
back
say
from this,
that
but
I
in the
did read
meantime, I
online
don't
this
want to talk
movie
about
was
the
supposed
themes
to
real
be
quick.
season four,
So in this
but
movie,
due I
there
think
are a
because of the
lot of
writer's
themes. Like
strike,
the first
due to the
being,
writer's
the
strike,
first
they
and most
couldn't
important being
really
family, and there's also
they
like
didn't have the money or the
honor,
resources.
duty,
So
ends
John
and beginnings.
Favreau
So
and
in
Dave
this movie,
Filoni
there's
they
a
kind of
big
like
talk
rewrote
on
it a little
family.
bit into a
And like
movie,
I
so that
said,
way
there's a
it
lot of the
worked.
same themes that you see in the
So
show,
yeah,
but
some of
here
the
it's kind
issues
of
we
more,
will talk
I would
about
say
with the
more
film later
amplified,
can kind of like
especially with
come back
like
from
the
this. But
story
in the
not being
meantime,
like
I
the
do want to talk about some
biggest.
things real
It's
quick.
more of a like a
So in
character
this movie,
centric
there are a
story,
lot of themes.
on
Like the
growth
first
and all that.
first
So
and most important
basically,
being family,
um,
and there's
in
also
this
like
idea of
honor,
family,
duty,
you're
ends and
focusing on
beginnings. So in
Mando and
this movie,
Grogu.
there's a big
Like
talk on
they're their
family.
own family.
And like I
In the
said, there's a lot of
show,
the same themes that you
Mando's
see in the
family got
show, but
killed
here
during
it's
the
kind of
Clone
I
Wars,
would
and they
say
got
more
taken in
amplified,
by
especially with the story not being like the
the
biggest. It's more
Mandalorians.
of a, like a
And
character
then,
centric
as he's
story
doing his thing, he
on
kind of
growth
creates
and
his
all
own
that.
clan
So
the
basically,
Mudhorde clan when he takes in
in this
Grogu.
idea of
But he's
family,
not exactly
you're
a
focusing
Mandalorian
on
because
Mando and Grogu.
like he
they're their
is,
own family.
you
In the
because
show,
whenever he gets his helmet
Mando's
off, he has to
family
go
got
back to
killed during
Mandalore,
the
redeem
Rumble. He
himself.
got
But
taken
he's
in
kind of like his
by
own type of Mandalorian. Like he's
the
not going to subjugate
Mandalorians, and
Grogu to
then
like all the
as he's doing his
teachings and all
thing, he
that
kind of
stuff.
creates his
They're
own
kind of like their
clan,
own
the
family.
Mudhorde clan, and he
And
became
a bunch of the
Grogu.
things that we
But
see
he's
in the
not
show is like,
exactly a
will they,
Mandalorian
won't
because
they? Like, will they stay together? Will they
like
not
he
stay together?
is,
Well, by the time that we're here
whenever he gets his helmet
in
off,
the
he has to go
movie,
back to
like as the movie
Mandalore and
starts, like we're
redeem
not dealing with
himself,
this
right? And he's
situation
kind of like his
anymore. We're dealing
own
with
type of Mandalorian. Like
how
he's
much
not
time
gonna
do they have left,
subjugate
right? And that's a big
Grogu to
issue,
all the
right?
teachings and all
In
that
this
stuff.
movie,
They're kind of like their own
for
family.
example,
And a
when
bunch of the things that
Mandalorian
we
or
see in the
Mando gets
show is like,
captured and
oh,
he's
will
talking
they,
to the
won't they?
twins,
Like, will they
they
stay
kind of
together?
like
Will they not
make
stay together? But by
a
the time
snide
that we're
remark at him. They're like, "Hey, you're not going to be
as the
here
movie
forever
starts,
for
like we're not
Grogu.
dealing with
He's
this
going to have to fight his
situation
own
anymore. We're
fights."
dealing with
And
how much time do they
like
have
I wouldn't say
left,
theme, but
right? And
that
that's
kind
a
of it
big issue,
conflict gets
right?
brought up a lot in this
In
movie,
this movie,
especially
like
the
for
second half of the
example,
film, or I would say like
when
near
Mandalorian
the
or
end of the
Mando gets
second arc,
captured and
beginning
he's
of the
talking
third
to the
arc,
twins,
when
they
Mando
kind of
gets
like
sick,
make a
and Grogu's kind of
a
having to,
snide
go
remark at
out on
him. They're
his
like,
own.
"Hey,
He's
you're
like,
not gonna be here forever for Grogu. He's gonna have to
what
fight his
if
own
Grogu,
fights."
what if Mando doesn't
And
wake up, right? Because that's his
that kind of
family.
like I want to say theme, but
That's all
it
Grogu knows. Like
conflict
he
gets brought
turned
up a
down
lot
Luke
in this movie,
Skywalker in the
especially
Jedi
the second
order
half of the
to
film,
go
or I
be
would
with
say like
Mando, because
near
that's
the
his
end of the
dad
second
or
arc, beginning of the
surrogate,
third arc,
or adoptive
when Mando
father,
gets
right? And we
sick,
see that a lot in this
Grogu's kind of
movie.
having to go out
But
on his own.
also
So
that we see, when Mando and
what if
Grogu were trying to grab Rada from
right? Because that's his
Shikari.
family.
I'm pretty sure that's how I pronounce
That's
it.
all Grogu knows. Like he turned
And they
down
get
Luke Skywalker
captured.
in the
There's a
Jedi
scene
order
after
to
all
go
the
be with
monsters
Mando
escape and
because
everything, where
that's his dad,
Mando, he's really
surrogate
happy to
family or
get
adoptive
Grogu
father,
back.
right? And we see that a
Because
lot in this
Grogu's
movie.
a child. He's
But
literally a
also
child. I mean,
that we see,
if
when
you want to
Mando
exclude,
and
oh, he's
Grogu
actually 50
were
years
trying to
old. He's
grab
not a
Rada
child. Well,
from Shikari.
yes,
I'm
the
pretty sure
whatever
that's how it's
species
pronounced.
Yoda is, they age
And they get
slower, but
captured. There's a
Grogu's
scene
still a
after
child. He's still like
all
a
the
really
monsters
young kid.
after
And there's a
happen to
really nice
get Grogu
scene
back,
when they get back
because
to the
Grogu's a
Rebel base
child.
when
He's
they end up
literally a child.
turning in
Maybe we're
Lord
like
Janu, where
skewed. Oh, he's
Rada is
actually 50
like
years
playing
old. He's not
around
a
with
child.
Grogu
Well,
on the beach,
yes,
and Mando's
whatever
watching
species
him,
Yoda
and
is,
Mando's kind of
age
like
slower, but
coming
Grogu's
back
still a
from
child.
almost,
He's still
I would
like a
say, like,
really
I
young
wouldn't say
kid.
losing him, but you get what I mean,
And there's a
right?
really
That
nice
moment where he felt
scene
like he
when they
lost
get back
Grogu, and then
to
he was
the
able to grab
Rebel
him.
base when they
All the
end up
thoughts keep
turning
rushing
in
into his head, like,
Lord
am
Janu,
I
where
really,
Rada is,
like the
playing around
best
with Grogu
person
on the
for
beach,
Grogu,
and
right?
Mando's
Like,
watching
am I the
him,
best father
and Mando's
figure?
kind of
Am I
like,
not just putting
coming
Grogu,
back from
in
almost,
harm's way? And
I
that's
wouldn't say
why
losing it,
when he
but you
goes
get what I
back
mean,
to,
right?
Sigourney
That
Weaver's
moment where he
character, he's
felt
like,
like he
hey, we're gonna
lost
take a break,
Grogu and then he
right?
was able to
Like, it's
grab
not
him.
so
You
much
get
that
all
Mando
the
got,
thoughts keep
captured.
rushing.
I don't think that troubles Mando. I think
The
what
best
troubles him
person for
is that
Grogu,
Grogu
right?
was in
Like, am
danger,
I the
because
best father
that's his
figure? Am I
family, right? He
not
doesn't want anything
putting
happening to Grogu because
Grogu,
he's
in
become that
harm's
dad
way?
now,
And
right?
that's
They're not
why when he
fighting
goes
to see if
back
they need to
to,
stay
Sigourney
together,
Weaver's
but
character, he's like,
I
hey, we're
do
gonna take
feel
a
like
break,
Mando
right?
is kind
Like,
of,
it's not so much that
readdressing the
Mando got,
situation that he, like,
captured.
the
I don't think
scenarios
that
that he puts
troubles
Grogu in,
Mando. I
right?
think what troubles
He
him
cares
is
deeply
that
about
Grogu is
Grogu,
in
but he
danger,
doesn't,
because that's his family,
he
right? He
doesn't
doesn't
want to
want
put him in
anything
the
happening to
scenarios where he can get
Grogu
in
because he's
trouble.
become
And
that
then
dad
also
now,
talking
right?
about
They're not
family,
fighting to see if they need to stay
you start
together,
talking with
but
Rada,
I do
the
feel
whole
like
situation with
Mando
the
is
huts. And something we
situations,
do see kind of like a nice
scenarios that
bridge
he puts
here
Grogu in, right?
between the two
He
families
cares
is Rada
deeply
and
about
Grogu.
Grogu, but he doesn't,
Grogu obviously is, the super cute character that
he doesn't
everybody
want to
likes,
put
and
him in a
Rada actually
scenario where
really
he can get in
enjoys
trouble.
Grogu.
And then
Rada's
also
not a bad
talking
guy.
about
He's a
family,
really nice guy, and so he's always taking
we start
care of
talking with Rada, the whole
Grogu.
situation with the
They have a really
huts,
nice relationship
and
in the
something we do see
movie.
kind of like a nice
But
like bridge
coming
here
from Rada's
between the two
side as the
families is
son of
Rada
the
and
crime
Grogu.
boss,
Grogu
Jabba the
obviously is
Hutt,
the super cute
like I
character
was
everybody
saying
likes,
earlier,
and
he
Rada
doesn't want to
actually really
become
enjoys
Jabba.
Grogu.
He wants to be
He's
his own
Rada's not a
person,
bad guy.
which
He's a really nice guy,
obviously
so
he's
he's
trying to
always taking
separate
care of
himself from that family. And then on top of the
Grogu. They have a
twins
really nice
who are
relationship
trying to,
in the
kill
movie.
him, you do see
But
that like the
coming from Rada's
opposites of
side
the two
as the
families.
son
Like
of the crime boss,
sometimes your own
Jabba the
family is
Hutt,
not,
and like I was
the
saying earlier, he
best for
doesn't want
you,
to
so you got to
become
form your
Jabba. He
own
wants to be
family,
his own
kind of like how
person,
Mando and
which
Grogu did. And
obviously
so
he's
you
trying
kind
to
of
separate
see,
himself from that family. And then on
why
top top of the
Rada is
twins
so,
who are trying to,
nice and
kill him, you
thoughtful
do
to
see
Grogu
that
because
the
Grogu's
opposites of
kind
the
of
two families,
getting that childhood that Rada wish he
sometimes their
had,
own
but
family is not,
and Rada's trying to
the
separate
best
himself from
for
the
you, so you got to
family,
form your own
obviously
family, kind of
because he
like
doesn't want to
Mando and
die, but
Grogu
he
did.
just doesn't feel like
And
that's
so you
his
kind of
family, right?
see,
So you get to see this
why
really nice
Rada is so,
family theme going on
nice
here,
and
and like what
thoughtful to
is
Grogu, because
family, right?
Grogu's
Like
kind of
maybe family
getting
isn't
that
putting
childhood
myself
that
in
Rada wished he
danger,
had,
or like
and
maybe
Rada's,
family
trying
is
to
the friends
separate
we made
himself from the
along the way type
family,
situation.
obviously
So
because
it's
he
a
doesn't
really
want to die,
important
but
theme
he
here
just doesn't
that
feel like that's his family, right?
that kind of like builds on top of everything. I think all
Family
these
theme
themes
going
build
on
on
here,
top
and
of what
like what
happened in the
is
Mandalorian show.
family,
But I
right?
think
Like
this
maybe
one is
family
kind of like the
isn't putting
big one.
myself
It's
in
the core one
danger,
of the whole show. So like
maybe
obviously,
family
this is
is
the one I want to
friends
talk
we made
about
along the
first.
way type situation.
Some of the
So
next themes I would say are that are pretty important are honor and duty, and kind of like the difference between the two.
think
So
all these
honor
films
more
go on
so is
top of
kind
it.
of
Like
like like
Mandalorian
which
too. I
you
think like
believe in, or as
this
opposed to
one's kind of the
duty,
big
where
one.
like
It's the core one of
if you
the
work for
show. So
somebody,
that
you're gonna
makes
do your
sense.
job,
This is
right?
the one I'm gonna talk about first.
And when you're looking at
Some of the next themes
bounty
I'd say
hunters, like
they're pretty important too
where
are
do the
honor
two
and duty, and kind of
differentiate?
like the
Where do they
difference between the
cross,
two.
right? So like
So honor
Mando,
more
he has a
so
do.
it's kind of like
See, I would say he has
which
a duty,
you
but he doesn't
believe
really
in,
work for
as
the
opposed to
High Republic,
duty
but he
where
does.
like if you
We're not
work
gonna
for
get into
somebody you're
semantics.
gonna do your
Like
job,
he has a
right?
duty to
And you're
help
looking
the
at
High Republic, right?
bounty hunters,
But does he bring
where
him
do
in
the where
dead
do
or
the
does he
two
bring him in alive?
differentiate?
Well, I mean, like that, like that's
So
where his
like
honor
Mando,
comes
he has
into
a
play.
do.
It's like, where,
See, I would say he
earlier
has a
in the
duty, but he
film
doesn't really work
when
for the High Republic, but he
Mandalorian
does
is
in.
like talking
I'm not gonna
to,
get into semantics.
like
Like
one of
he has a
Reaver's character, he's like,
duty
hey,
to
I don't work
help the High
with the
Republic,
Huts.
right?
I don't do that crime
But
stuff
does he bring
anymore.
him in dead or does
Well,
he
I
bring
mean, in
him
the
in
beginning of
alive?
the
Well,
film,
I
he
mean, like that,
shot the
that's
ex
where his
Imperial
honor
officer.
comes into
Yeah,
play. It's
it's a
like
bad
where,
guy. Don't
like
get me wrong.
earlier in the film
But
when
I mean, is
Mandalorian
that really
is
who
like
you still want to
talking
be?
to
Like, do you still want to,
Sigourney
be
Weaver's character,
that
he's like, hey,
bad,
I don't work
like that
with the
bad
Huts. I
person,
don't do that
right? Or are you
crime
gonna bring
stuff
in the
anymore.
character alive, like
Well, I mean, in
the
the
bad
beginning of
guy
the
alive?
film,
And
he
then as the
shot
movie
the ex
progresses, we
Imperial
see
officer. Yeah,
Mandalorian
it's a
kind of
bad
change that
guy.
about
Don't get me
himself, and
wrong.
especially with the whole like
But I
honor thing
mean,
that I'm kind of talking
is that
about.
really who you
Like
still
he
want to
could have
be?
obviously
Do you
just
still want
dropped off
to
Rada
be
and got the
that bad,
information about
like that
got the information
bad
about Lord
person,
Janu,
right? Or are you gonna bring in the
from the
character
Huts,
alive,
but he
like
doesn't
the
because he's
bad
looking
guy, right?
at
And then
Rada,
as the
and
movie
he's
progresses, we
kind of like,
see Mandalorian
do I
kind of
turn him
change that
in?
about
Do I
himself,
not?
especially with the
And I
whole
think
like
that's the
honor
key
thing that I'm
moment
kind of
where
talking
Mandalorian
about.
kind of like
Like he could have
kind of
obviously just
changes a little
dropped
bit.
off Rada
Like
and
obviously
got the
he's
information
an
about Lord
evolving
John,
character
or
all the
got the
time,
information about
and
Lord
we see that a
Janu
bunch of the time during
from the
the
Huts,
show.
but he
But
doesn't,
obviously
and he's
here,
looking at Rada, and
he
he's
comes
kind
in
of
guns ablazing, and then he kind of
do I
has to
turn him in?
reassess the
Do I not?
situation, right?
And I
Like,
think that's the key
yeah,
moment where
even though he
Mandalorian kind of
works
just
for
kind of
the
changes a
High
little bit.
Republic,
Like
what's
obviously
the right
he's an
thing to do?
evolving character all the
Like
time.
what's
And we see that a bunch of the
what
time during
honors
the
him
show.
as a
But obviously
Mandalorian,
here,
right? And so
like
I think that's like a really really good
to assess
topic.
the
Or
situation, right?
you get to
Like,
see the
yeah,
juxtaposition,
even
the
though he
opposite of
works
that with
for
Imbo, right?
the High
Imbo's a bounty
Republic,
hunter
like
too.
what's the right
He
thing to
has a
do?
duty to do his
Like
job to the
what's the
twins,
like what
but the
honors
moment
him as a
shit hits the fan, he's
Mandalorian,
like,
right?
I'm out of
So
here. And I
I
think
think
a
that's like a
good
really
thing to
really
see
good
also
topic at the
here
core.
is
Because
that
like
Embo
Embo
is
is
kind
kind
of
of like
like, what would have
what would have
happened to
happened to
Mando
Mando
if
if
he
he
didn't
didn't
meet
meet
Grogu,
Grogu,
right?
right?
Like, obviously they're not the exact same character, but it's a good mirror, right? And, there's like the little thing where like Embo has like a servant dog as opposed to Mandalorian having Grogu, who's like, an actual child. Not so much on a child aspect, but the fact that they have a loving relationship versus like a master and servant relationship. But Embo is a very like cold killer, right? And that's like what Mando is trying to get away from. Like that's kind of like what he was at the beginning. He's trying to get away from, right? He's just doing the job, right? He's not there to just like go kill everybody, right?
Yeah,
Obviously as
Embo's a
cool
very
as the line
cold
is, I can
killer,
bring you in
right?
cold
And
or
that's
warm.
like what Mando is trying to
Mando's
get
trying to
away
like
from.
move
That's
away
kind of
from
like what
that.
he was at
He's
the beginning. He's
trying to
trying to get
become
away
like a
from, right? He's just doing his
family
job,
man, but
right?
still
He's
trying
not
to be
there
his
to
own
just like
person.
go kill everybody,
But
right? Obviously
when
he's
you're
cool
looking
with
at
it, but the
Embo, you're
line
like,
is
this is
I
a
can bring
very
in cold or
cold-blooded
warm.
killer, right? Like he don't
And
give a
Mando's
fuck.
trying to
He's gonna do,
move away
whoever
from
pays
that.
him the
He's
highest, stuff
trying
like
to
that.
become like
He doesn't really
a
have a
family
duty. He
man,
doesn't
but
really
he's still
have an
trying to be his
honor.
own
His honor
person.
is like, oh, let me get
But
paid.
when you're
So I
looking
think
at
that's really
Embo, you're
awesome. And
like,
I
this is
also
a
kind of
very
like
cold-blooded
ties
killer,
into the
right? Like he
family
don't give a
thing.
fuck.
If you
He's
really want
gonna
to get
get
into the weeds
whoever
of it,
pays him the
like,
highest.
well, like, is family
Family. He doesn't
higher than
really have an
honor?
honor, and
Right,
honor's like,
stuff
oh,
like
let me
that.
get paid.
Or his family
So I
higher
think
than
that's
duty?
really awesome. And I
If
also
I
kind
have a
of
family,
ties into the
am
family
I
thing,
gonna,
if you really want to get
protect
into the
them,
weeds
or
of
am I
it,
gonna
like,
care about myself? Right?
is
And
family higher than
looking
honor,
at the two families that we
stuff
talked
like
about
that,
earlier,
or his family
there's a
higher than duty,
distinction between
if I have a
selfishness
family,
and
am I gonna protect
selflessness,
them,
right?
or am I gonna
Like
care about myself,
Mandalorian, as the
right?
movie
And
progresses, he becomes more
looking
and
at the
more
two families that we talked about
selfless, right?
earlier,
He
there's
tells
a
Grogu to go on the
distinction
ship and
between
go
selfishness and
go back
selflessness,
and
right?
keep
Like
himself safe.
Mandalorian, as the
Or
movie progresses, he becomes
he
more
decides
selfless,
not
right?
kill
He
Lord John,
tells Grogu
try
to
to
go
help
on
the
the
New
ship and
Republic. He's doing these
go
selfless acts, and obviously
go
what
back and
he's
keep
doing
himself
is
safe,
paying off.
or
Like you look at
he
Grogu, Grogu didn't
decides
leave. He
to not
stayed
kill
back and
Lord
he took
John,
care
and try to
of
help the new republic, and he's
Mando.
doing these selfless
And it's
acts.
very nice to
And
see,
obviously what he was
how
doing here
Mando,
was
because
paying
there's a
off.
lot
You
of
know,
times I
you look
think
at
in the
Grogu.
later
Grogu
half of
did,
this
you know,
film,
he
starting with the
stayed
second
back and
act
he took
moving
care
forward,
of
where Mando's like, is
Mando.
what I'm doing
You know,
really
and it's very
beneficial
nice to
to,
see, you know, how Mando, because, you know,
Grogu? And I
there's a
think
lot of
the
times
whole
I think
idea,
in the
or
later
not the
half of
idea,
this
the
film,
whole
you know,
like
starting with the
visual
second act
visual
moving forward,
representation
where
of
Mando's like,
seeing
is
Grogu
what
take
I'm
care of
doing really
Mando,
beneficial to,
and staying
Grogu? And I
behind
think the
is
whole
proof that
idea,
what
or not the
Mando
idea,
is,
the whole
is doing is working.
visual
Now maybe he
representation
doesn't
of
have to,
seeing
the
Grogu take
best
care of
circumstances, but
Mando,
there's a
you
scene where
know,
Rada's like,
and
we don't always get the best circumstances,
staying
but we got to make the
behind
best
is
out of it,
proof
right?
that what
And I think there's a
Mando is,
lot of good things
is
that we can
doing is
get from
working.
that. And
Maybe
then,
he doesn't have to,
for the
the
last thing
best
that I really want to talk
circumstances,
about,
but
it's like
there's a scene
ends
where
and
Rada's like,
beginnings. So
like
as I talked about
we're
with
gonna get the best
family,
out of
like you're always gonna have a
the
family,
good
right?
things that we can get from them.
Or
And
for the most
then
part, you're always gonna have a
for the
family.
last thing that I
Whether
wanted
that
to
be
talk
like,
about was
you
like
lose your
kids
old
and
one, you find a
memories.
new one, stuff like
So
that.
as I talk
But
about with family,
so
like you're always gonna have
everybody
a family,
dies.
right?
Like,
Or for the
in
most
Star
part, you're
Wars,
always gonna
you
have
don't
a
always
family.
have the same
Whether that
lifespans.
be
Like
like you lose your
Grogu's
old
gonna be up
one,
to
you find a
900
new
years
one,
old,
stuff like
right?
that.
And Mando's
But
probably only gonna be like what,
so
if
like
100,
everybody
right?
dies.
Like I don't know what
Like
species he is. Like,
in Star
most
Wars, you
humans
don't
don't make
always
it
have
to
the same
100. They
lifespan.
make it to like 70,
Grogu is
80,
gonna be
stuff
up
like
to
that. You get what I
900
mean?
years old, right? And
And
Mando's
like I
probably
was
only gonna be
saying
like
in the
what,
movie, we
if
talk about
100,
the
right?
themes,
I don't know
like
what
the like the
species, but
conflict
most
of,
humans
yeah,
don't
they're a
make it to 100.
family,
Like they
but
make
how
it to like
much longer does
70
this
or
family
stuff like that. You
last,
get what I mean?
right? And that's kind of
And
like
like
one
I
of the
was saying,
bigger
like in
like
the movie,
issues
they
they talk about in
talk
the
about the
story. Like
themes
Grogu's
of
Mando's like,
like the
like why
conflict
should like like
of
kind of
yeah,
like
they're a family, but
why
how
should
much
I
longer
like
does this family
subjugate
last, right?
Grogu to
And that's kind of like
living
one of the
with me
bigger
if
like
in
issues they
in
talk
so
about
many
in the story,
years
like with
I'm
Grogu's
gone, right? Like he
Mando's
should go focus on
like
his own
why
thing,
should he
becoming a
like
Jedi.
kind of like
Well,
why should I like
the
subjugate
same situation
Grogu
gets brought up here,
to
and it's not
living
so
with
much
me
like,
and in
oh,
so many
we shouldn't be
years
together
I'm
anymore. It's
gone,
more
right? He
so
should go focus on his
there's
own thing,
not
becoming
much
a
time
Jedi.
left.
Well,
And I think that's a really good
the
story.
same situation gets
Not
brought
story.
up
I think
here,
it's a
but
really
it's
good
not
thing to
so much
touch
like,
on
oh,
because
we
yeah,
shouldn't be together
that's the
anymore. It's more
reality of the
so
relationship,
there's
right?
not much
Like
time left.
Mandalorian's only going to be here for so
And I think
long.
that's a really good
Grogu
story.
is going to
Or
outlive him
not
like
story. I think it's a really good
hundreds
thing to
of
touch
years.
on
I'm thinking
because
of the
yeah,
Invincible meme,
that's
but
the
anyway,
reality of the
um,
relationship, right? Like
that's just the
Mandalorian is
reality of it. And
only
I
gonna be
think the
here for
way the
so
movie
long.
takes it in this
Grogu is
time
gonna outlive him
versus like
like
in the
a
shows is
hundred.
like it is the next step, right?
Anyway,
Like for the
um,
second half, or I would say like the
that's just
second
the reality of it. I
quarter,
think the way the movie
or like
takes it in
the
this
last one
time
third of the
versus
film,
like in the
we
shows is
see
like it is
Grogu
the
kind of
next step,
take
right?
in
Like
like a
for
lead
the
role,
second half,
right?
or I
Like
would say like the
it's so
second
often in the
quarter
show do we
or
see
the last one third of the
Grogu being
film,
the one that's
we
like being
see
taken
Grogu
captive and
kind of
all that, and
take
so Mando has to
in
save him. But the
like
roles
a
are
lead
reversed
role,
here, and I think it's
right?
like
Like
really
it's so
fitting,
often in the
right?
show
Like
we see
there's a scene where
Grogu being the one that's like being taken
how do you pronounce his
captive and
name? Like
all that, and so
Gatori?
Mando has
I'm
to
pretty
save
sure.
him. But the
Whatever.
roles are reversed here, and
Gatori,
I think it's
he
like
like when
really
he gives
fitting,
the serum
right? Like
to
there's a scene
Grogu, he's like, "Hey,
where
this might not work, and you have to realize that some
how do you
things
pronounce
come
his name?
to an
Like
end." And obviously, like Grogu's like a kid, but I
when
think
he
he does
gives the
realize
serum
that
to
at the situation here.
Grogu, he's like,
He
"Hey,
does
this
realize the
might not work,
situation,
and you
and
have
I
to
think
realize
that's
that
like a
some
really
things
good
come
like
to an end." And obviously,
maturing
like Grogu's like a
aspect.
kid, but I
Like
think he does
I
realize
really
that in
wanted
the
to see, and I'm
situation
glad that
here.
we got this all on screen.
He
Like,
does realize the
yes,
situation, and I
Grogu,
think it's like a
everything
really good
works
like
out in the end of the movie, but
maturing aspect
Grogu
of
knows, right? Because most of the
really
time it's
wanted to
just
see, and I'm
Din
glad that
Djarin.
we
Like
got
Din
this all
Djarin's
on
like kind of
screen.
like hey, I'm not gonna be
Yes,
here forever.
Grogu,
Well,
everything
Grogu
works out in
knows
the
now.
end of the
He
movie,
probably did
and
know, but he's
but
kind of like
Grogu knows,
facing
right? Because
reality.
most of
Like,
the time it's just
hey,
Din
I'm
Djarin's
taking
like kind
care
of
of
like
my dad.
hey, I'm not
My
gonna be
dad's
here
not always gonna
forever.
be here,
Well,
so I
Grogu
kind of have
knows
to
now,
pick up the
I
slack,
probably
right? And
did
he
know,
does. He
but
does
he's
pick up
kind
the
of like
slack in the movie. He does
facing
go and
reality,
rescue
like hey,
you know
I'm taking care of my
Din
dad.
Djarin.
My
He does
dad's not
his
always gonna be
own
here,
thing. He does
so
help
I
take
kind
down
of
the
have to
robots and
pick
all
up the
that. And I
slack,
think it's
right? And
like a very
he does pick
positive
up the
step,
slack in the
right?
movie. He does go and
And
rescue
I think that's what this movie does
you
like a
know
good job of. It takes
Din
like it
Djarin,
does
and he
really
does
well with
his
the
own thing.
story
He
that
does
we
help take
got
down
in
the
the
robots
show,
and all that. And
and
I
it
think it's
builds
like a
upon
very
it, right? Like, what
positive
is the
step, right?
relationship looking like forward,
And I think
right?
that's what this movie
Obviously, we're not
does
going
a
to
good
time
job of.
jump
It
20
takes it like
years
it does really well
and
with
see
the
like
story
Jedi
that we
Grogu,
got in the
an old
show,
man,
and it builds upon it, right?
Clint
Like what is
Eastwood
the
type
relationship
Mando.
looking
But
like
this is
forward,
like a very
right?
realistic,
Obviously we're not gonna time
take
jump
on their
20 years
relationship. Like,
and see like
they're
Jedi
getting
Grogu,
older. They're
an
not always
old
going to be
man,
here. And Mandalorian might
Clint
not
Eastwood
always be
type
there to take
Mando,
care of
but
Grogu.
this
So
is like a
Grogu
very
has to be able to
realistic,
take care of,
take on their
them too. And
relationship.
I thought that was really nice. I thought that
They're
was really
getting
nice.
older, they're not
And if
always
you're
gonna
really
be
want to get like
here,
the nitty
and
gritty,
Mandalorian
like
might not
ends and
always be there to
beginnings,
take care of Grogu, so Grogu
um,
has to be able to take
I
care
would
of
say
them too. And
when
I
Jabba
thought that was really
dies, and
nice. I just thought
after
it was
they
really
kill
nice. And if
the
you're really gonna get
Hutts,
like the nitty
right?
gritty,
That
like
is
ends and
the end of
beginnings,
like the Hutt line,
um,
right?
I would say
Rada is becoming
when
his own
Jabba
character,
dies,
obviously.
after they kill
He's becoming his
the
own person.
Huts,
So kind of like the
right?
Hutt
That is
name
the end of
is
like
taking
the
on like a
Hut
new
line.
meaning too, right? He's joining the New Republic.
Wada
He's
is
doing
becoming his
something
own
good.
character, obviously.
Now, if you really wanted
Becoming
to
his own
get even
person. So kind
more
of
into
that
this
type of
theme,
name
right,
is
and you wanted to
taking
get
on
into
like a
the
new
bigger
meaning
like
too, right? He's joining the New Republic. He's
spread
doing
of
something good.
the Star Wars universe, you're
If you
thinking
really
ends
wanted
and
to get
beginnings.
even
Stuff is
more into
always
this theme,
starting and
right? If you
ending in
wanted to get
Star
into
Wars,
the
especially when you look
bigger
at this
like
trilogy, right? Like you
spread
got the
of the
rise of the Jedi
Star
Order, you
Wars
get the
universe, you got
fall
the
of the
ends and
Jedi Order, you
beginnings.
got the
Stuff is
rise of
always
the Empire, you
starting
get the
and
fall of
ending
the
in Star
Empire, you get the
Wars,
rise of
especially when you look at this
the
trilogy,
rebellion, and
right?
the
Like
New
you got the
Republic, right? And
rise of the
that's the
Jedi
setting we're
Order, you got
literally
the
in. We're in
fall of
the
the Jedi Order, you got the
rise. I
rise
mean,
of the
obviously some time
Empire,
has
you got the
passed, but we're in the
rise of
rise
the
of
rebellion
the New
and the New
Republic in
Republic, right? That's the
juxtaposition
setting we're literally in.
juxtaposition
We're
of
in the
the end
rise.
of the
Obviously,
Empire.
some time has passed, but we're in
You
the
know,
rise
you're looking at the
of the New
two.
Republic
Now,
in
obviously,
juxtaposition
spoiler
juxtaposition
alert.
of
You haven't seen any
the
other Star
end
Wars
of the
films, but in the
Empire.
sequels, the New
you
Republic
know,
doesn't work, and
you're
there's a
looking at
whole
the
like discussion
two,
right there.
and
Like
now
I'm not gonna get
obviously,
into it, but
spoiler alert,
basically,
if you haven't seen any other
things
Star
don't
Wars films with the
happen,
sequel,
and the
the New
Empire
Republic
it
doesn't
takes
work.
advantage of that, and that's how they
There's a
become the
whole
New
other
Order.
discussion right there. Like I'm not gonna
But
get into it,
anyway,
but
basically what I was trying to
basically,
get at is, you see these
things
two
don't
civilizations,
happen,
you see like,
and the Empire
one
it takes
beginning and
advantage
one
of that, and
ending,
that's how they
right? Like
become the New
one in
Order.
creation, one in
But
destruction.
anyway,
But yeah,
basically what I was trying to
those
get
are the
at
themes
is,
of the
you see these two
story.
civilizations, you see
I
like,
think the story
one
of this
beginning
movie
and
is
one
very,
ending,
like I
right?
said,
Like
very like
one in creation,
simple,
one in
and
destruction.
there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like
Those are the themes of the
obviously, like
story.
I said, it was supposed to be made for a
I think
season
the
4 of the show.
story of this
But I
movie
think
is
with what
very,
they
like I
made
said,
here,
very
it's
like
very simple,
simple,
and that's why I
and there's
appreciate
nothing
like the
wrong with that,
character
right? Like
development. Like even though it's not like
obviously, like I said, it was supposed to
crazy,
be made
crazy
for a season
development,
four
like
of the
we get a
show,
lot of
but
realistic
I think
things
with
here.
what
Like
they made here is like
stuff
very
is
simple, and
happening,
that's what I
and the
appreciate like
relationships
the
are
character
growing
development. Like even
in
though
a
it's
way
like
that I feel like is
crazy,
very,
crazy development, like we get a lot of
authentic, and
realistic things
that's
here.
what
Like
I like about it.
stuff is
We don't have to
happening,
be in this
and the
crazy like
relationships are growing
what's
in a
going
way
on
that I
next
feel
in
like is
Star Wars? Like
very,
we're taking a minute here and we're
authentic, and
breathing
that's what I
and letting
like
these
about it.
characters,
We
like
don't have to be in this
assess, their
crazy
own
like,
relationships. And I
what's
don't know.
going
To
on
me,
next in
I
Star
like
Wars?
it.
Like we're
I
taking a
enjoyed
minute here and we're
the
breathing,
stories,
letting
the
these
movie's
characters, like
story,
assess,
right? Like it
their
doesn't
own
have to be this
relationships.
crazy whole thing. As
To
long as
me,
like if the
I like it.
story is
I enjoyed
moving
the
the
movie,
characters forward,
the
even if it's like in a
stories,
small
the
inch, right?
movie's
Like, and I'm
story,
not saying there's not
right? Like it
issues with the
doesn't have to be
story.
this
There is,
crazy whole thing.
but
As
I
long
still
as like
really
if the story
enjoyed
is moving
what
the
the story
characters
offered
forward,
and
even
like
if
how
in a
it gave
small
us
inch,
this
right? Like I'm
environment
not saying there's
for the
not issues with the
characters to
story. There
grow.
is,
And I
right?
also
Like
really
I
like to
still
get into
really
these characters
enjoyed
that we don't really see a lot,
what
like
the story
Imbo,
offered and
Rada,
like
stuff like
how it
that.
gave us this
I really thought the
environment
story with
for the
Rada and
characters to grow.
the
And I
other,
also really liked how
Huts
you
was
see
really cool. That was really
characters that we don't
interesting,
really see
right?
a lot,
And
like
obviously
Imbo,
set in the
Rada,
whole,
stuff like
like New
that.
Republic
And
era.
I really
It's
thought the
whatever.
story
I
with
didn't really care
Rada
about that, but still,
and the
I
other
cared more about
galactic
Mando
people
and
was really
Grogu and all
interesting,
that.
right? And obviously
But
set in the whole,
yeah.
like New
But
Republic era
beyond
and all
that,
that. It's whatever.
as for
Didn't really
like
care about that, but
pacing and
still,
stuff like
I
that, I
cared
would
more about
say
Mando and Grogu and
this
all
movie's
that.
pretty fast paced.
But
There's a lot of
yeah.
action. You
But
kind of
beyond
like,
that,
yes, you are
as
going
for
from
like
point A to point
pacing
B,
and
but
stuff
like
like that, I
it's
would
very
say
rare that it drags. Like very, very rare. I would say
there's a lot of
the really
action.
only
You
big
kind of
moment that
like
it
yes, you
drags
are going
is
from
in like
point
the
A to point
second,
B,
like
but like it's
pushing third
very
half of the
rare that
film
it drags. Like
when
very rare.
Grogu
I'd
is
say
taking
like
charge.
the really
When Din
only big
Djarin is
moment that it
thick.
drags
It's
is
a
in like the
short time,
second
but it
like
feels really,
pushing
really
third half of the
long.
film
I will say.
when
But
Grogu
other
is
than that,
taking
like
charge.
once you
When
get
Din
back
Djarin is
to Din
sick.
Djarin healed,
It's a short
the movie picks
time,
up again.
but it
Now,
feels
there's like
really
30
really
minutes
long.
left.
I will
Don't get me
say.
wrong, but
But other than
they
that, like
have to. But
once you get
for the
back
most part,
to
the
Din
movie's
Djarin
going
healed,
pretty quick,
the
right?
movie
You got
picks up
action
again.
A,
Now
you got
there's like
action B.
30 minutes left.
You're
Don't
going
get me
pretty
wrong,
quick,
but
and I wouldn't say
you
too
have
quick to
to.
where you're
But
like,
for the
whoa,
most
whoa,
part,
whoa,
the
whoa,
movie's
what's going
going
on, right? Like
pretty quick,
it's
right? You got
just
action
enough to feel
A, you got
right. So I
action
do
B.
say that the
You're going
pacing of the
pretty quick,
story
and I
is
wouldn't
really
say too
well,
quick to where you're like,
and I
whoa,
think
whoa,
that
whoa,
does,
whoa, what's going on, right? Like
rely on
it's
it needing to
just
be a
enough
very
to feel
simple
right. So I
story.
do say that the
Now,
pacing of the
there are some
story is really
caveats to
well,
that. Like,
and I
I
think
do
it
think the
does,
scene where,
rely on
Grogu's
it needing to
hiding
be a very
from,
simple story.
hiding and Gattori's like,
Now,
oh, wait.
there are some
So this
caveats
is
to that. Like,
exactly what you
I
need
do
to
think the
save the
scene
main character of
where
the movie?
Grogu's
Like, that
hiding
is a
from
pretty, like, on the
hiding
nose,
and
and you're like,
Gattori's
oh,
like, oh wait,
yeah, to
so
me, that
this
was
is
a cop out.
exactly what
You're
you
kind of
need
like,
to save
I
the
feel
main
like that
character of the
could have done
movie.
better, but at the
Like
same
it
time,
was
you got
pretty
like
like
30
on
minutes
the
left in the
nose, and
movie,
you're like, oh, like to
right?
me that's
You
a
got to pick
cop
it
out.
up, but
You're kind of like
still,
I feel like
it's
they
whatever. I
could
don't
have
really
done
care about
better, but
that,
at the
but
same time you got like
I don't
30
know.
minutes
I
left in
like
the
the
movie.
story. I
Like
like that we got to see some new character. Well, I say
you
new,
got to pick it
but
up.
like some
Still
reoccurring characters that we didn't really
it's
get to
whatever.
see
I don't really care
before.
about that, but
Like I didn't
I know
mind that it was a
I
simple
like the
story.
story. I like that
I
we
thought it
got to
was
see some
fine.
new
Like I
character.
liked it.
One
It's
second,
it
but like
very
some
much
reoccurring
feels like a
characters I didn't really get
Mandalorian
to see
story,
before.
but also doesn't really feel like
Like
a
I didn't mind.
Star Wars story in the sense that
That
like
was fine.
it's
Like
not
I
the
liked it.
traditional Star Wars, and
It
I
very
like that.
much
I didn't mind
feels
that.
like
I
a
didn't mind that.
Mandalorian story,
But it was really
but it
cool.
also doesn't really feel like a
As for
Star Wars
characters, like we
story in
kind
the
of already
sense
did
that like
talk about
it's
that,
not
but
the
I think
traditional Star Wars, and
Grogu
I like that. I didn't
and
remember. I
Rada
didn't.
were the best characters here. Like
There's like
Grogu himself and that like
I was gonna say I kind
self-realization,
of
like,
already get
hey,
to your
I'm gonna
point
have
with
to
that,
take a
but I
step
think
and
Grogu
grow up here a little bit,
and Rada were
because
the best
I'm,
characters here. Like
Mando,
Grogu
my
himself
dad's
and
not
that like
always gonna be here,
self-realization, like,
so I'm
hey,
gonna have
I'm
to,
gonna have to
be a
take a
big
step
dog, for a
and
minute.
grow up
I
here a
think
little
that was really
bit
nice. I really
because
like that. Obviously, he's still like
Mando, my
really
dad's not always
funny
gonna be
kid.
here,
He's
so I'm gonna have
he's
to
the
be a
tiny
big
guy.
dog,
It's
for a
I
minute.
get
And
that, and
I
I
think
really
those were
liked
nice
Rada's
here. I like
character.
that. Obviously, he's
He
still
was
a
kind of like
very
the burpy,
funny
like,
kid.
little baby in
He's the
Clone
tiny
Wars, but here he
guy,
had a really
and
cool character. I
I
think
get that.
Jeremy
And I really
Allen
liked
White did a
Rada's
really good
character.
job.
He kind of like the burpy,
Especially with the
like
voice
when
acting. But I think the story for obviously the story for Rada was not like groundbreaking, right? And I know some people complain like all that Rada did was say he didn't want to be his dad. But beyond that, I think his story is really cool. I want to see Rada moving forward. Obviously, I love Grogu. I'm always gonna go see Grogu. But I will say, Mando didn't have the best story, right? Like, obviously, I'm pulling things out of the movie that I liked about it, right? But there are some things where you kind of like, okay, well, like, what did Mando do in the story, right? He got sick. He's helping find the Imperial officers, but like, what really happens, right? I'll say in this movie, I think they're setting up stuff for Mando. Like what I was saying is Mando's looking at his family with Grogu, and he's like, I feel like I'm not in the best situation for
Right,
him,
right.
right?
They
They
don't
don't
really
really
address
address that, I
those
would
things,
say,
and
and
I
I
think
think
that's
that's
because
because
they're gonna do. They're
they're
waiting
waiting
to
to
do
do
something
something
with
with
Mando
Mando
that
that
if
if
they
they
were
were
to
to
do
do
it
it
now
now
would
would
upset a
upset a
lot
lot
of
of
people,
people
or
or
like
like
maybe
maybe
mess with
mess
their
with their
plans.
plans.
And
And
just
just
bear
bear
with
with
me.
me,
Like
like
I
I
could
could
be
be
wrong.
wrong.
Again,
Again,
everything I
everything I
say
say
on
on
my
my
videos
videos
are
are
opinion
opinion
based,
based,
right?
right?
This
This
is
is
just
just
how
how
I
I
interpret
interpret
it.
it.
So
So
like,
like
don't
don't
like
like,
shoot
shoot
me
me
in
in
the
the,
comments
comments
like
like
Josh,
Josh, never,
never
never
review
review
Star
Star
Wars
Wars
ever
ever
again.
again.
Like I'm
I'm
just
just
giving
giving
my
my
opinion.
opinion.
There
There
is a
is a
scene
scene
where
where
Mando
Mando
is
is
fighting
fighting
that
that
water
water
mock
mock
or
or
whatever you
whatever you
want
want
to
to
call
call
it,
it,
the
the
water
water
creature,
creature,
and
and
he
he
doesn't
doesn't
have
have
his
his
helmet.
helmet.
And
And
yeah,
yeah,
he's
he's
put in
putting
belt
belt
to
to
ass
ass
because
because
the
the
Mandalorian.
Mandalorian,
But I
but I
also
also
feel
feel
like
like
there
there
was a
was a
sense of
sense of
vulnerability
vulnerability
there.
there. Like
Obviously, he
obviously he
doesn't
doesn't
have
have
his
his
mask,
mask,
right?
right?
He
He
doesn't
doesn't
feel
feel
like
like
100%
100%
complete.
complete.
But
But
also,
you
a
know, a
bunch of
bunch
people
of people
complained
complained
about
about
like,
like,
why
why
do
do
we
we
take
take
off
off
his
his
mask
mask
again,
again,
right?
right? Like,
We
we
just
just
did
did
that
that
last
last
season.
season.
We
We
just
just
fixed
fixed
that.
that.
I
I
think
think
it's
it's
more
more
so,
so,
what
what
is
is
Mandalorian
Mandalorian
doing?
doing? Like,
What
what
is
is
Din
Din
Djarin
Djarin
going to
gonna
do
do
forward,
forward,
right?
right?
The
The
moment he
moment he
puts
puts
on
on
his
his
mask,
mask,
he
he
feels
feels
safe.
safe,
And he
and he
starts
starts
doing
doing
his
his
thing.
thing.
But
But earlier,
Din
Din
Djarin
Djarin
was
was
like,
like,
struggling
struggling
with,
with,
how
how
does he
does he
take
take
care of
care of
Grogu,
Grogu,
but
but
not
not
get
get
him
him
into
into
these
these
situations where
situations where
he's in
he's in
danger.
danger?
I
I
think
think
moving
moving
forward,
forward,
after
after
they
they
finish
finish
whatever
whatever big story they want to do, I
I
think
think
Din
will
Djarin
retire
will
from being,
retire from
a bounty
being,
hunter.
a bounty hunter.
From being,
From
I
being,
don't want to say a
I don't
Mandalorian
want to
because
say a
that's very much
Mandalorian because
who
that's
he
very
is as a
much who
character.
he is
But
as a character, but
you know,
you know,
like
maybe,
maybe just the
like
bounty hunter.
maybe
But
just the
maybe
bounty
he
hunter, but
does
maybe
retire
he
from
does
being,
retire from being,
that
that
Mandalorian. Maybe he
Mandalorian.
does
Maybe
become
he
at
does become
peace
at
with no
peace
longer
with
carrying
no
the
longer
armor,
carrying
right?
the armor, right?
And
And
I would say there's
I would say there's
breadcrumbs of that
breadcrumbs
story
of
because I
that
don't think we're
story
gonna
because
have
I don't
another
think we're
story,
gonna have another
at least in my
story,
opinion,
at least in my
where he
opinion,
gives up
where
Grogu,
he gives
right?
up
I don't
Grogu,
think we're
right?
having
Like
that. I
I don't
think
think
we're
we're having
beyond
that.
that.
I think we're
That's
beyond
what I
that,
think they're
and that's
focusing
what I
on.
think they're
Okay, this is
focusing
gonna
on. Like,
last
hey, this
forever.
isn't gonna last
And
forever,
I think
and
also here,
also
maybe
here,
Mando being a
maybe Mando being
Mandalorian
a
isn't gonna last
Mandalorian
forever
isn't
too.
gonna
So
last
I'm just
forever
saying
too. So I'm just saying,
and that's what I'm saying.
and
I
that's
don't
what I'm
think they
saying. Like,
pulled
I
the
don't think they
trigger on
pulled the
something like
trigger
that
on
now
something
because
like that now
got
got
cash cow, right? Like
cash
you're
cow,
not gonna
right?
just be
Like
like,
you're
oh yeah,
not
fuck
gonna just be like, oh
Mando,
yeah,
right? He's
fuck
not
Mando,
Mando
right? Like he's
anymore.
not Mando
He's not
anymore.
Mandalorian
He's
anymore.
not Mandalorian
But also
anymore.
like
But also
that
like
sounds like
that
his
sounds
in
like an
game story, right?
in-game
Like he
story,
does
right?
his
Like you
thing,
do his
he goes
thing,
through all these
he
adventures
goes
with
through all these
Grogu,
adventures with
and at
Grogu,
the end,
and at
maybe
the
that's when
end,
he
maybe
retires. Like
that's when he
maybe that's when he
retires. Like
takes off
maybe
the
that's when
helmet
he
one
takes off
final
the
time,
helmet one
right?
final time, right?
That's what
I
I'm
don't
just
know.
saying.
That's what I'm just saying.
But yeah, I will
But yeah,
say
I will say no,
Mando
Grogu.
himself didn't have
Mando
like the
himself didn't have
best
like the
story going
best
on
story
in this
going on
movie. And
in this movie,
obviously,
and
again,
obviously,
the
again,
story
the
itself is
story
not
itself is not
that
that
action packed, not
action
that
packed, not
crazy
that
dense.
crazy dense.
There's not a lot of ways for
There's not a
everybody to
lot of
go,
ways for
but
everybody to go, but
for the most part,
for
that's
the
what I thought
most
about
part,
the
that's what I
characters.
thought about the
Okay,
characters. Now, okay,
no, I'm gonna save that for. I'm gonna
no,
save
I'm
that
gonna
for
save that
acting.
for
I'm gonna save that for acting.
I'm gonna save that for acting. I'm gonna save that for acting.
All right.
All right.
So that is mostly
So that is
writing
mostly
and story
writing and
aspect,
story
and we'll move on to
aspect, and we move
production.
on to
All
production.
right. So first
All
part,
right. So first part,
aesthetic. I've
aesthetic.
kind of
I kind of
rehashed this
rehashed this
multiple times,
multiple times,
but yeah, this is a
but
Star
yeah,
Wars
this is a
film.
Star Wars
Kind of like how I
film.
said the
Kind of
ice
like how I
cream
said
thing. I
the
think it's
ice
a
cream
good
thing. I
mix
think
of
it's a good mix of known
well known and
and
kind
not
of
so
bring it
well known,
together.
and they
And I
kind of
think
bring it
that's what
together. And I
makes
think
the
that's what
film like
makes the
really
film like
good,
really
right?
good,
Like yeah, it's cool to
right? Like yeah,
see
it's cool to see,
all
all
these
these
characters
characters
that
that
we
we
already
already
know.
know. But
And what
personally,
I think Star Wars
and
is
what I
trying
think
to
Star
do
Wars
is
is
they're trying to
trying to
make
do is
they're
they're trying
trying
to
to
make
move into a
they're
new
trying to
era
move
where
into
we're
a new
not
era
focused on the
where we're not
Skywalker
focused on the
saga, right?
Skywalker
But we
saga,
do have
right?
character
But we do
A and
have
maybe
character
character
A,
C
maybe
that
characters see that we
bringing
know that
into
we
it,
can bring into the
these news
these
stories. And
new stories. And
I thought this was a good
I
addition to
thought
it,
this
like
is a good addition
this
to it,
new
like
era of
this
Star Wars that
new
we're trying
era of
to
Star Wars that we're trying
be
to
introduced into.
be
You
introduced
know, we got a
into.
good
We
combination of
got
people
a
we
good
know. We got a
combination of
good
people we
combination of
know. We
people
got
we
a good
don't know. And
combination of people we
I
don't know. And
thought
I
it was
thought
good. Like the
it was
aesthetic
good. Like
that
the
this is in
aesthetic that
Star
this is
Wars
in Star Wars
works
works
because they had
because
both.
they had
And
both.
so,
And
yeah, you get to
so,
see
yeah,
like your
yeah, you
creature,
get
like,
to
oh,
see like your
I know
creature,
that
like, oh,
creature,
I know that creature,
like, oh, I know
like,
that
oh,
planet that they're
I know that
talking about,
planet
like
that they're
stuff like
talking
that.
about, like stuff like that.
I think it works.
I think it works.
But when I say like maybe
But
it's
when I
not
say
like
like maybe it's not like
exactly a Star Wars
exactly a
film,
Star Wars
you
film,
know, yeah, it's not
yeah,
like it's
it's
not gonna
not like
be a
it's not gonna
Skywalker
be a
saga film.
Skywalker
So
saga film. So like
yes, it
it,
feels
yes,
Star
it
Wars, but it's
feels
obviously
Star
very
Wars, but it's
different. Like
obviously
it
very
feels like
different. Like it feels like
Mandalorian. I know
Mandalorian,
what you're thinking, like,
and
man,
I know what you're
Josh,
thinking. Like, man,
Mandalorian
oh
is Star
Josh,
Wars.
Mandalorian is Star
It
Wars.
is, but
It
it's like kind of
is,
different.
but
Like
it's like
right,
kind of
Star Wars
different. Like,
itself
right,
has a
Star Wars
very
itself
like
has a very like
samurai,
samurai,
cowboy, like Western
cowboy, like
feeling, and
Western
Mandalorian
feeling.
does have
And
that. Don't get
Mandalorian
me
does
wrong,
have that. Like, don't
but
get me
this is a
wrong.
very
But this is a
standalone
very
film. So
standalone
like,
film.
yes, it
So like,
has the
yes, it
same thing that
has
Star
the
Wars
same thing
has,
that Star Wars
but it's
has,
also very different.
but
Like
it's
there's
also
not a
very different. Like,
huge
there's not a
military
huge
presence over
military presence over
the
the,
empire,
the
right? We're not like
empire, right? We're
overthrowing
not
the
like
bad guys
overthrowing
of
the
the
bad
rebellion,
guys of
right?
the
We're in the
rebellion, right?
beginnings of the
We're in
new
the beginnings
republic,
of the new republic,
taking out
taking out
what's left of the
what's
empire.
left of
So
the empire. So,
yes, the idea is
yes,
still
the
there, but it's
idea
still
is
very
still there,
much
but
its
it's still
own
very much
story,
its
right?
own story,
So
right?
like it does a good
So
job of bringing
it does
back
a good
those
job at
roots that
bringing
we've
back
seen
those
from Star
roots
Wars
that we've
before.
seen from Star Wars
The
before.
lone samurai
The
with the
lone
cub,
samurai
stuff
with
like
the
that.
cub,
Right?
stuff like that.
Basically, that's
But
what I'm trying to get. The
basically that's what I'm
aesthetic is
trying to get.
there,
The
but it's
aesthetic is
very
there,
different.
but it's
So
very different. So
leaving that at. All right.
leaving
So
that at.
next,
All right. So
acting.
next, acting.
As for
As for
Mando, I think
Mando,
Pedro
I think
Pascal does
Pedro
always does a good
Pascal
job
does
with the
always
voice
does a good
acting.
job with the voice
This is
acting.
just a pet
This is
peeve
just
of
a pet
mine.
peeve of
But
mine. But
Pedro
obviously, since
Pascal
Pedro
does like
Pascal does like
voiceover,
voiceover,
there are moments where you're kind
there
of
are
like when he
moments where you're
says
kind of like when he
something,
says
you're
something,
kind of just kind of
you're
like
kind of just kind of like,
right, like if
right,
you know
like
Pedro
if you
Pascal's
know
not
Pedro
in that
Pascal's not in
costume,
that
then it kind of
costume,
takes you
then it
out
kind of takes
sometimes.
you out
But
sometimes.
somebody that
But
doesn't know,
to
you're like,
somebody
oh,
that
that's the
doesn't know, you're
Mandalorian,
like, oh,
right?
that's the Mandalorian,
To
right?
me, sometimes
I don't
like
know.
when
To
I'm
me,
watching the
sometimes like when
film
I'm
and
watching
I
the
can
film and
tell
I can
that's not
tell
Pedro
that's
Pascal in
not
the
Pedro
costume,
Pascal in the
like you are
costume,
kind of just like,
like
oh, this
you
is the
are
guy
kind of
like
just like, oh, this is the
speaking
guy like
over
speaking
the
over,
armor,
the
right,
armor,
over the scene
or
or whatever.
over the
And it's
scene or
kind of
whatever,
whatever.
and it's kind of
And
whatever.
also like
And also like
Mandalorian, he's not a very
Mandalorian,
emotional
he's not a very
person, right? So
emotional
like a
person,
lot of
right?
his
So like
lines are
a
kind
lot
of
of his
given out
lines are
like
kind of given out like
mediocrity,
mediocrity, like not like
Pedro's
he's
doing a
like
bad job.
Pedro's
Just
doing
like
a
the
bad job. Just
tone
like the
is kind of
tone
like very like
is kind of like very
monotone.
like
It's kind of like, oh
monotone. He's kind of
no,
like,
like
oh
something goes
no,
on, like,
like stuff like
oh
that. He's
my
not like,
god, like, right?
oh
There
my
are
god,
some
like
scenes where he's
there
kind
are
of like
some scenes where he's kind of
like
like
that, but I
he's
mean,
like that. But I mean,
that's just who he is. He's
that's
not
just
like
who he
a
is. He's
very
not, a
emotional,
very
expressive
emotional,
person.
expressive person. So I could see how you're like, oh, Pedro Pascal didn't do a really good job. Well, I mean, look at the other things. The Mandalorians, and like he's not a very like emotional person. I think Grogu, he's not an actor, right? But we'll get into the what is it, the puppetry, robotics and all that later. But I think like as a character, not story wise, but like as a production wise, I think it was very nice and eccentric to see Grogu, do a lot of his acting, visually, and all like the subtle things. And like I said, we'll get into that puppetry in a minute. But I do want to give like props to Grogu as a character, like moving around, interacting with people, and all that. But yeah, as for Jeremy Allen White, I think he did a really good job as Rada. I think he did a lot better, like maybe voiceover wise than Pedro Pascal. I feel like there's a little more emotion in the character. Now, I will say, like if you didn't know it was Jeremy Allen White, then you probably didn't know the voice. But if you know who Jeremy Allen White is, and you know what his voice sounds like, and you like took a second, and you're like listening to it, like you'd be, oh, that is him, right? Like I don't know if they added like they turned down his voice, brought up the bass and stuff like that. I don't know if they did it with the computer or anything, but like let's say they didn't. He did a really good job, changing his voice and stuff like that. I think he did a really good job. I feel like he could feel the compassion, in his character. I don't know. He did a really good job. Same goes with Zeb. Like Zeb wasn't really in the film a lot, but the voiceover was just really good. You could tell, especially with the mocap. I thought it was really nice. I thought his character was really really cool. The last actor I really want to talk about is Sigourney Weaver. Um, she did a good job, but I do know some people were complaining about it. They're like she kind of phoned it in, stuff like that. And yeah, I will have to agree. There are a lot of scenes where you're kind of like, and I think the most like stand out scenes where she's like that is at the end, right? When I was saying, the New Republic comes in, they bomb Talhutta and all that. Like she's flying the ship and she's like, "All right, Bando, I'm gonna bomb." Like there's not a lot of emotion in there. I will say, like for the most part, she does a pretty good job. She cracks a smile. She does her job, right? She's doing her job. But people are like, "Where's that extra oomph?" Right? Um, to that, I'll say I agree, but also at the same time, this is Star Wars, right? Like yes, there's some scenes in the prequels and the sequels where you got some really good acting. Shout out to Ewan McGregor, Hayden Christensen. Um, I'm blanking on names right now. Ray and Kylo, actor and actress, like they're all doing an amazing job, or Poe Dameron, Iser Oscar Isaac, like they have good acting, but like is Star Wars known for its acting? At least in my opinion, no. Right? Like a lot of the stuff that happens in the original trilogy is not the best acting, right? We're not watching The Godfather, a lot of stuff in the prequel, like it's or even some of the sequels, shit's always getting trolled on. Like people always making fun of like the actors and all that. Like they fly now, they fly now. Like it's not meant to be taken super seriously, but also I think at the same time, like that's not an excuse to have like bad acting. And I'm not saying Sigourney Weaver like did a bad job. I'm just saying like obviously like she maybe she wasn't 100% in it, right? But I'm just saying like before we start
Pinterest
blaming
galleries are
everybody. Like,
ridiculous.
let's take a second to
Like what
assess.
things,
Star
what
Wars
the
is not
Mando's
the cream
Mandalorian
of the
character is
crop.
not very
So,
emotionally
but
based.
yeah, I just wanted to say that.
I think
But again,
Grogu,
like I said, it's not an
fine
excuse to
actor,
have bad
right?
acting in the movie. I'm just
But we
saying,
get
like,
into
a lot of stuff in
like
Star Wars, stuff's
the people
always getting made
hating
fun
on
of.
robotics and
There
all
are
that
good
lately. But
scenes, there
I
are
think
good moments or
like
actors,
before we
especially
start
Natalie Portman and Hayden
blaming
Christensen
everybody, like
scenes. Like,
let's
there's
take a
great
second to
acting in the
assess
movie, but for a lot of
Star Wars
moments, you're
is
kind of like
not
you'll
the
stare at
cream
them
of
and
the
you're like,
crop. So,
that's a funny scene.
but yeah, I just
So
wanted to
I
say
just
that.
wanted to
But
say
again,
that,
like I
right?
said, it's not an
I don't
excuse to
want to
have
hate
bad
on
acting
anybody,
in
but
the
I did
movie.
want to
I'm
bring
just
some
saying like
realism in there.
a
But
lot
yeah,
of stuff in Star Wars, stuff's
yeah, yeah,
always getting
yeah.
made fun
All
of.
right,
There are good
moving on,
scenes, there are
moving
good
on.
moments or
Directing.
actors,
I
especially
think
Natalie
John
Portman
Favreau did a really good
and
job with
Hayden
this movie.
Christensen scene.
Like I
There's
said,
great
movie's very
acting in the
like
movie
fast
for all
paced.
normies who
You're
kind of
very going A
will
to
stare at
B.
it and
You're
be like,
not really slowing down a
that's a
lot. The
funny scene.
action's really
So
good.
I just wanted to say that.
And I think he did a good job. I think he did
I
a
didn't
good
want to
job.
hate on
I like his
anybody, but I did want to
films.
bring some realism in there.
I
But yeah.
like to me, this is kind of like Iron Man,
All
right?
right,
Like obviously, it's not the
moving on.
beginning of a cinematic
Cinematic
universe,
universe,
but
but
it does what it needs to do. It gives you the action, it gives you the story, and it's a good job. I think John Favreau did a really good job. So I don't see the issue here. Um, as
As
for
for
the
the
cinematography, I think the cinematographer of this film did a really good job. Um, there's like obviously there's not a lot of scenes in this movie where you're like, oh my god, that was like really good cinematography. But I think there's a lot of scenes where like
obviously there's not a lot of
ships are
scenes in this
flying,
movie where you're
actions
like, oh my
happening
god, that was like
that are
like
like really stand out, right? It gets you engaged. You're like,
really good
whoa,
cinematography.
that was a cool scene,
But
stuff like
I
that.
think there's a lot of scenes where
Or
like
especially with some of the moments where the you're from like
actions
Grogu's point of
happening
view, you're like, oh, these are
that
some
are
cool
like really
shots. Like I
stand out,
really
right?
enjoyed seeing this, and so I want to give a big shout out to David Klein. He did a good job.
Yeah, he
Like I said,
you're like,
Star Wars
whoa,
is like
that was
it
a
was a
cool scene,
groundbreaking
stuff
film when
like
it first
that.
came out, but like, at the
Or
same time, it's
especially with
not
some of the
like
moments
on a cinematographer's aspect, like it's not like
from like
groundbreaking. Like
Grogu's
there are
point of view,
groundbreaking
you're like,
aspects
oh,
of it,
these are
like
some cool
costumes, you
like
know,
seeing this. And so I want to give
miniatures,
he did a good
like
job.
special effects.
Like
Like
I said,
those are
Star
all
Wars
like
is
really good. That make Star Wars really amazing.
when it first
But
came out,
like the
but at the same
writing,
time, it's not like
acting
the
and cinematography are not
cinematographer's
like what
aspect. Like it's
makes
not
Star
like
Wars. Like yeah, we
groundbreaking.
got
Like
the
there are
iconic
groundbreaking
like
aspects of it,
sweep
like
or transitions. But
costumes
like if you look at Star
or
Wars, like what makes Star Wars? It's just
like
it's
special
like the
effects. Like
characters,
those are
the
all
funny
like really good that make
planets that we
Star
go
Wars
to,
really
the
amazing.
interesting characters
But
that we see,
like the
stuff like that, or
writing,
the actual
acting,
like
and
story behind Star
cinematography are
Wars,
not
not
like
like the movie
what
story,
makes
but like
Star Wars. Like
Jedi's
the
or the
iconic like
Empire, stuff
sweep
like that. Like
or the
that's what people like
transitions.
about
Like if
Star
you
Wars.
look at Star
Not so
Wars,
much like, oh my god, that was an awesome shot,
it's
right?
just
Like nobody's talking
it's
about
like the
that. But I do think
characters,
this
the
film
funny
has like good
planets that we go
moments.
to,
Like
the
I said,
interesting
I think
characters that we
the
see, stuff
POV
like that.
shots
Or
from Grogu are really
the
cool.
actual like
How we're able to switch
story
from
behind Star
those.
Wars, not
Or
like
I
the
think that
movie
like
story, but
in
like
the scenes where the spaceship
or
is
the Empire,
flying,
stuff like
like
that.
when
Like
the Razor
that's what people
Crest
like
and we're
about
being
Star Wars.
attacked on
That's
Telhutta or
where it's
stuff
like,
like
oh my god,
that.
that was an
Like when
awesome
we
shot,
change
right? Like
aspect
nobody's
ratios,
talking
I
about
think
that.
that's
I do
cool.
think this film
It
has
pulls
like
you
good
in,
moments.
right?
Like
I don't
I
know.
said, I think
I
the
thought it was a good
POV
job
shots
between
from Grogu
him
are really
and
cool.
John
How we're
Favreau.
able
So
to
you guys did
switch
a
from
good job.
those, or
Before
like
I move forward, I
where the
forgot. I
spaceship
wanted to
is
address two
flying,
people real
like
quick
we're in the Razor
that I think
Crest and we're being
did
attacked
a
on Telhutta or
standout
stuff
job
like that.
for
Like
acting.
when we
So
change
I want to give a
aspect
big shout
ratios,
out
I
to
think that's
Lateef
cool.
Crowder
It
and Brendan
pulls you
Wayne.
in, right? I don't know.
So if I mispronounce your name, I'm very
Between
sorry.
him
But these two
and John
guys
Favreau,
are
so
the
you guys did a
guys
good
that
job.
come in every
Before I move
day and
forward,
they
I
put on the
forgot
Mandalorian
I wanted to
costume and
address
they
two
bring the
people real
Mandalorian
quick
to life.
that I
Like,
think
yes,
who
Pedro
did a
Pascal gives the voice, but these guys are doing the
Lateef
stunts, they're doing the
Crowder and Brendan
mannerisms, they're
Wayne.
doing all of that. So I want to give a big shout out to
But
these
these two
guys. I feel like a lot sometimes their
every
work goes
day and they put on the
underappreciated. So
Mandalorian
I want to give a
costume
big
and they
shout out to
bring the
these guys. Like
Mandalorian to
they
life.
bring Mando
Like
to
yes,
life,
Pedro
right?
Pascal
So
gives the
thank you
voice,
guys. Thank
but
you guys.
these
Your
guys
acting
are
is
doing the stunt
awesome sauce. So thank
mannerisms.
you.
They're doing
But yeah, moving
these
on,
guys.
I
I
do
feel
want to
like a
point
lot
out
sometimes their work goes
the thing
underappreciated,
that
but
makes Star
I
Wars,
want to
the
give a big shout out to
cinematography,
these guys. Like they
the
bring Mando
CGI.
to
Oh,
life,
sorry,
right?
sorry.
So I
We were
think
just talking about
thank
cinematography.
you guys. Your
The
acting is
CGI, the
awesome
SFX, the
sauce.
VFX.
So thank
I
you.
think think this movie's
Moving
CGI is
on,
really, really
I do
good.
want to
Like, there's
point
a
out
lot of great
the
CGI in the
thing that
scene
makes
in this
the
movie. I don't think
cinematography,
there's any time where I like
the
saw a scene and
CGI.
I was
Sorry,
like,
sorry, sorry. We're
right?
just talking about
Like, because
cinematography.
in
The
modern film
CGI,
now,
the
especially with
SFX, the
so much
VFX.
CGI being used,
is really
deadlines
good.
being
Like there's a
rushed,
lot of
and
great
artists,
CGI you see
being
in the
forced to work
show.
on multiple
I think there's
projects.
any time where
Especially
I
like when
like
you look
saw
at
something I
the
liked,
MCU, more modern
right?
MCU movies.
Like
There's
because
some
in
moments where you're
modern
kind of like,
film now, especially there's
really?
so much
And this,
CGI
they
being
didn't drop the
used,
gun. Everything looks beautiful. The
deadlines being
planets look
rushed,
amazing.
and
Talhutta.
artists, being forced to work on multiple
Um, how do
projects.
I always
Especially like
keep
when you look at
mispronouncing
the
this wrong.
MCU,
Like
more modern MCU movies, there's
Shikari.
some moments where
Shikari
you're kind of
looks
like,
beautiful. Like they each
really?
have their own
And
personalities.
this,
I think
they
all the
didn't drop the gun.
creatures
Everything
themselves
looks
look really
beautiful.
nice. Like when they're fighting the
Planets look
Colosseum,
amazing. Talhutta.
awesome, beautiful.
How do you?
Or
I always forget
Rada, the
how to pronounce
huts
those
looked
movies.
awesome. Or Embo himself
Shikari.
looked
Shikari looks
amazing.
beautiful.
Or
Like they each have their own
stuff like that. Like
personalities.
everything
I
just
think
looks
all the
real,
creatures
right? And it is just really nice. So I like, and that's one of the
awesome,
things that I'll get
beautiful.
into a minute.
Or
Where
Rada the
I'm
huts looked
glad that
awesome.
this
Or
was a movie.
Imbo himself
I'm
looked
glad that
amazing.
we got the
Or
big budget,
stuff like that. Like
for
everything
for
just
this
looks
film. So
real, right?
I wanted to shout out to
It is
all
just
those
really
guys,
nice. So
everybody that
and that's
worked
one of the things
on
that I'll get into a minute.
the production
Where
companies for
I'm glad that this was a
the
movie.
CGI, the
I'm
SFX, the
glad that they
VFX.
got the
That was
big
working a
budget
part of Industrial Light and Magic.
for
So
this film.
John
So
Knoll,
I wanted to shout
Hal
outs to all those
Hickel,
guys
everybody
and
else that
everybody that worked
worked on that team. On top of that, I wanted to shout out,
the CGI, the
the
SFX,
you getting into the puppetry for Mandalorian
light
and
and
Grogu,
magic.
like that
So
was really
John
awesome. I
Knoll,
read online that they
Hal
added more
Hickel, everybody
puppetry,
else that
its
worked on that
movements to
team.
Grogu, because I think he's like part robot,
You
part
know,
puppet for
the
this film, and then we've had
getting
in
into the
previous
puppetry
like
for
shows.
Mandalorian and
Because
Grogu. Like it was
like when I first
awesome. I read
watched it
online
without
that they
like
added more
reading about it, I kind
puppetry.
of noticed that like there's a lot of more like
Movements to Grogu.
emotion
Because
that we
he's
can
like
see
part
from Grogu.
robot,
You're not
part
just doing the
puppet.
occasional
For this film,
turn
like
my
we've
head,
had
or
in
like wave,
previous
using
shows.
the Force.
Because
We
in that
got some
time,
ear
like when I first
movements. We got
watched
some
it,
like
without
fun
like
like
reading
eye
about it, I
movements,
kind
stuff
of
like
noticed
that.
that. Like there's a lot of more
Right?
like
It was very
emotion
nice
that
to
we can
see.
see
You're
from
not
Grogu. He's
like
not
to
just
me
doing
it
the
felt like, oh,
occasional
this wasn't just a
turn my
puppet,
head,
right?
or like
Like
wave,
it
or
wasn't
use
just
the
a
force. Like we
robot. It's
got
supposed
some
to be doing
ear movements. We got
did
some
the highs. Like
fun, like
he
eye
felt more
movements, stuff
alive,
like
and I
that.
thought it was a really
Right?
nice
Like
job. So I
it's
wanted to give
very
a
nice
shout
to
out
see.
to
Like to
everybody
me,
that
it felt
worked
like,
on
oh, this
that.
wasn't just a
It
puppet,
was just
right?
it was a
Like it
really
wasn't just a
really
robot that's
nice
supposed to be doing,
job. I
to the
really
eyes.
liked getting to
He
see that, and
felt
I think
more alive,
some
and
of
I
the
thought it was a
robots,
really nice job. So I
like those
wanted
two
to give
big
a
ones in
shout
front
out
of the
to everybody
huts,
that
they
worked
were
on that.
miniatures.
Like
So I
it
always
was
think
just
that
it was a
the people that work
really
on the miniatures in
really
Star Wars,
nice job.
phenomenal
I
job. Like
really
that's where
like
it
getting to see
started.
that,
Like
and I think
stuff like
some of the
that is like
robots,
what made Star
like those two
Wars,
big
and they
ones in front
always
of
do a
the
great
huts,
job
they were miniatures.
at
So I always think that the people that
continually
work on the miniatures in Star Wars,
making a great
phenomenal
effort
job. Like
in
that's where it started. Like
building on top of
stuff
what they
like
worked on
that is
before,
like
and
what
then like
made
making new
Star
stuff.
Wars,
Like
and they
they always
always
do a
do
good
a
job. So
great
I
job
wanted to give a shout out to
at
those people. Also,
continually
moving on, want to give a
making
huge
a
shout
great
out to
effort
some other
in
people that worked out for Legacy
building on top of what
Effects,
they worked on
like
before, and then
Mike
like making new
Manzel,
stuff. Like
Don
they always do a
Dinger,
good job.
Jason
So
Matthews,
and I
Trevor
want to give a shout
Hensley,
out to those people.
Victor
Also,
Bradley, and
moving
everybody
on,
else.
want to
You
give a
guys
shout
did an
out
awesome job.
to people that worked
As
for
for the last
Legacy
people I want to
Effects,
talk about, it's for all
like
the people
Mike
that worked on
Manzel,
the
Don Dinger,
costumes and the makeup. Because yes, we have our
Victor,
CGI
Bradley, and
stuff and our
everybody else.
puppets
You
and all
guys did
that
an
in Star
awesome
Wars,
job.
but we also have the other side. We
As
have the
for the last people
CGI,
I
we have
want
the
to talk about,
costume
it's for all the
designers,
people that
right?
worked
And
on the
all these
costumes
big part
and
departments
the
that we're
makeup.
talking about make
Because
Star
yes, we
Wars, like
have
I
our
said.
CGI
And the
stuff and
costume
our
department,
puppets
I
and
feel
all
like
that
is
in
the
Star
most
Wars, but we also
iconic,
have the other
right? Like we
side. We
got
have
the
the
ships, don't get me
CGI,
wrong. We had the
all
groundbreaking
these big
CGI, yes,
part
but like, what do
departments that
we
we're
think of
talking
when we see
about
Star Wars? We
make
think of the
Star Wars, like I said.
costumes, right?
And the
Like the
costume
Jedi
department, I feel
cloak,
like, is the
the Darth
most
Vader
iconic,
costume,
right? Like we got
the
the
man,
ships. Don't get me
the
wrong.
Mandalorian helmet,
We
right? Like
had
these
the
are all
groundbreaking
very iconic
CGI,
things,
yes, but like, what do we think of
or
when we see Star Wars?
like
We
stuff
think of
like
the
that. So I do
costumes,
want to give a
right?
shout out to them
The
because like
Jedi
all these
cloak,
people,
the
like
Darth Vader
they do an
costume,
awesome
the
job at
man,
bringing
the
Star Wars
Mandalorian
to life.
helmet,
So
right?
like
Like these are all very iconic
at
things.
least for me,
Or
when I was
stuff
a
like
kid,
that. So
you're
I do
watching a
want to give
movie
a
and you're
shout out
like,
to
oh,
them because like
that's
all these
makeup.
people, like
You're like,
they
eh,
do an awesome
that's not
job
really
at
a,
bringing Star Wars to life.
an
So
alien. But as I've grown
at least
up,
for me,
and matured,
when I was a
I've
kid, you're
really
watching a movie and you're like,
grown
oh,
fond
that's makeup.
of
You're
the
like,
makeup that they put into
that's not really
these characters and helping bring
an
them to life.
alien.
So
But
I do
as
want to
I've
shout out those
grown
people.
up,
Like
and
they did a
matured,
really good job. So
I've
like thank you,
really
especially like
grown fond
The
you know,
character
the
from
makeup
the
that they
Lord
put on
John
them, you know,
place, the one with the
these
horns,
characters
his
you have to
makeup was
really
really
learn
cool,
to
and the
watch.
fact that
So
they
I
were
always
able to,
shout
like,
out
I
to
don't know how they
people.
did it, but the
They
fact
did
that
a
they were
really
able to,
good job.
like, break off the horn, like, that was
Um,
super cool. That was really
the
awesome. I
character
don't know, I
from
really
the
like the
Lord Janu
aliens in Star
place,
Wars. I
the
think
one with
they're
the
also,
horns,
like, also
his makeup
all
was really cool,
always
and the
really
fact that
cool,
they were
like,
able
whether
to,
it
like,
be
I don't know how they did it,
CGI,
but the fact that they
practical
were able to, like,
makeup, you name it.
like
I
pop the
think
horn,
it was
that
awesome.
was
I think it was
super cool.
absolutely
That was really
awesome
awesome. I don't
sauce.
know. I really
So,
like the aliens
shout
in
out to
Star Wars. I
those
think they're
guys.
also like also
But
always
yeah,
like
so like
always
Mary
whether it be
Zophris,
CGI,
Christina
practical
Waltz, like
makeup, you
you
name it.
guys did
I
such
think
an
it was awesome. I think it was
awesome
absolutely
job.
awesome
So
sauce. So
thank you guys.
shout out to those
As for the
guys.
last people that kind of like
But
really,
yeah, so
really
like Mary
make
Zophris,
Star
Christina
Wars
Wall,
is the music, right? Like
such an
everybody knows John
awesome,
Williams.
awesome job.
This guy has been
Yes.
the
As for
dog
last
when it
people that
comes to
kind of like
iconic
remake
movie soundtracks.
Star Wars,
I will say, as much as I love
everybody
John
knows John
Williams, there
Williams.
is a second, like,
This
there's a
guy has
new, I wouldn't
been
say he's a new composer. He's
the
very well known
dog
in
when it
film,
comes to
but I would say he's
iconic
coming a
movie
very close second
soundtracks.
to John Williams in
I will
terms of
say, as
like
much as I love
how
John
awesome
Williams,
he
there is
is,
a
and that
second, like,
is,
there's a new,
and
I
I'm
wouldn't say
I'm
he's a
gonna
new
I'm
composer,
probably gonna
he's very
mispronounce
well
it,
known in
so
film, but I would say
apologies,
he's coming
but I'm gonna
a
try my
very
best.
close
It
second to John
is
Williams in terms of,
Ludwig
like,
Göransson.
how awesome he
I
is.
might
And
have
that
pronounced that
is,
wrong, but this
and
guy, I
that
love
I'm
this guy.
probably
I
going to
love this
mispronounce it, so
composer. Like he
apologies,
created the original
but I'm going to try my
music
best.
for the
It
show, and he created the
is
music here. And
Ludwig
there's just one
Göransson.
song that plays, and it's like
I might have pronounced that wrong,
it's
but
why I
this
wanted
guy,
to
I love
say that
this guy. I love
Shikari
this
is cyberpunk
composer.
because the music
Like, he
itself is
created the
very
original
cyberpunk
music
esque.
for the show, and he created the
And like
music
the
here,
moment you
and
hear it,
there's
you're
just
like, you
one
got
song that plays, and it's like,
right,
it's why I
you're
wanted to
bumping in
say
your
that
seats. Like I
Shikari
think
is
I've seen everybody
cyberpunk because the
online say
music
like that
itself is
song is
very
one of their favorites.
cyberpunk-esque.
And he does a good
And
job. He
the
does an
moment you
awesome
hear it,
job in
you
everything that he's in. The music is just
right,
amazing.
you gotta
And
bump it in
obviously,
your
like John
seats. Like, I
Williams is a
think I've
very
seen
hard
everybody online
person,
say like that
to
song is one of their
to
favorites. And
like
he does a
compare
good
with.
job. He does an
But
awesome
in
job in
my
everything that
opinion,
he's
I
in.
think
The
this
music is
guy
just
is,
amazing.
the
And
next
obviously, like,
best
John Williams
thing,
is a very hard
right? And
person,
obviously, I want to keep seeing him
to
create like awesome things. Like
compare
he
with.
just won his
But
third
in
Oscar
my
for
opinion, I think
Sinners. Like
this
he's
guy
doing an
is,
awesome job. So like
the
I can't wait
next
to see this
best
guy moving
thing,
forward. And I just want to
right?
give a
And
shout out to Broski.
obviously, I want to
He
keep
had an
seeing him create
awesome
like awesome things. Like, he
job
just won his
creating,
third Oscar for
music for this and
Sinners.
just
So
in
he's
general.
still
He's one of
doing
my
an
favorite
awesome
composers.
job. So like, I can't wait
So
to see this guy
shout
moving
out to
forward.
bro.
And I just want to
You
give
did
him
an
credit
awesome
for
job.
this because
Thank you, thank you, thank
he
you,
had
thank
an
you.
awesome
All right.
job creating
Um Moving
music for
on.
this, and just in general, he's one of my favorite
So
composers.
that's
So
all
shout out to bro.
production and
You
writing
did an
about the
awesome job.
movie.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
I thought it was
All
amazing.
right.
But as for any
Mm-hmm.
possible plot holes or unanswered
So
threads or
that's
stuff like
all
that,
production and writing about the
I've
movie.
already kind of addressed where I was
I
like,
thought it was
that
amazing.
moment where
But
Gattori's
as for
like,
any
"Hey,
possible
Grogu, here you
plot
go,"
holes or
like,
unanswered threads or
yeah,
stuff like
it was
that,
kind of a cop out.
I've already kind of
There's
addressed
like
where I was like,
like
that
a lot
moment
of the
where
stuff in the movie,
Gattori's
like
like,
it's kind
"Hey,
of like
Grogu, here
very,
you
oh,
go," and you're like,
place A, place B, place C.
it was kind of a
I think
cop
it
out.
worked. I just think it was that
There's like
moment where you're
like
kind of
a lot
like
of the stuff in the movie, like, it's kind of like, all
it
right,
kind of
oh,
felt cheesed
place
in, and
A,
then
place
everything
B,
else
place
kind of
C.
worked.
I think it
Now,
worked.
as for like
I just think it
where
was
does the
that
Mandalorian and
moment where
Grogu go
you
next, like
kind of like,
spin-offs and stuff like that,
it kind of felt cheesed in, and then
it's
everything else
kind of
kind
a
of
hard
worked.
thing to say
Now, as for like
because the movie
where does
didn't
the
do the
Mandalorian
best,
and
right?
Grogu
Like if
go
it did the
next, like
best, like
tie like spin-offs and stuff
Greenlight
like that?
Mandalorian and Grogu 2, like instantly. But it
Hard thing
didn't
to
do the
say
best.
because the
And,
movie didn't do the
I'll get
best,
into
right?
that in
Like
a
if it did the
minute,
best,
but
like Greenlight, Mandalorian, and Grogu 2, like
at
instantly.
the same time,
But
like who's in
it didn't
charge
do
of
the
Star Wars?
best,
It's Dave
and
Filoni. Like this is
I'll get into
his
that in a
him and
minute.
John
But
Favreau, everybody else that's working on this. These are their passion
at the same
projects. Like they
time,
like
like, who's
Clone
in charge of
Wars.
Star Wars? It's
They're
Dave
bringing back their
Filoni. Like,
characters like
this is
Ahsoka
him and John
and stuff like
Favreau,
that.
everybody else that's
And they're also
working on
bringing
this.
in these new
These are their
characters like we got
passion
Mando,
projects. Like, they like Clone
excuse me,
Wars.
and Grogu. Like
They bring back their characters
they're
like
not gonna let him fall
Ahsoka
by the wayside. Like
and
Grogu
stuff like
himself is like
that.
a huge,
And they're also
like
bringing
a
in these new
cash
characters
cow.
like
Like
we got
everybody's gonna show up
Mando,
if they see Grogu.
excuse me, and
But
Grogu. Like,
I don't know.
they're not gonna let him
I
fall
don't
by the wayside. Like,
understand
Grogu
why
himself
people were
is like
so
a
upset
huge
about this
like a
film.
cash cow. Like,
Like,
everybody's gonna show
yeah,
up when they see
like it
Grogu.
wasn't the most
But
iconic Star Wars film,
I
right?
don't know.
Like nothing
I don't
like
understand
changed
why people
story
were so
wise,
upset about this
Like
film.
it's not the
Like,
generic Star Wars
yeah,
film, but
there
the
like
fact that they
it wasn't
tried
the
something
most
new is what I
iconic
really
Star Wars film,
appreciated.
right? Like, nothing
And I said this earlier, like we're
changed
getting
story
into a new
wise,
era of Star Wars.
Like,
Like we're
it's
not
not
going to be
the
watching the
most iconic
Skywalker saga episode 17, right? Like we're moving beyond that. We're getting into stories that are outside of that story. So like I think this was a good example, right? Like and every time Star Wars tries something new, they get shot in the foot, right? They tried Solo. They were trying to see like how well I won't say background movies, but like bio movies for characters. Like we were seeing Han Solo's backstory, like backstory movies. It didn't do that hot. Yeah, I thought it was a good film. I didn't mind it, and that's when kind of like the Lambda movie or project kind of fell by the wayside. But then, you know, Mandalorian and Grogu came on Disney Plus. That did really well. So they greenlit, Book of Boba Fett, and that didn't do so hot. And then the later seasons of Mandalorian and Grogu, they didn't do the best, And then we got Andor, that did really well. That show did really well, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's really like the other two. And then like Ahsoka, that's doing really good, but we haven't gotten a new season yet. So I do know that
Dave
Dave
Filoni is
Filoni is
working
working
towards kind of
towards
like
kind of
his
like his
own
own
story right
story
now
right
with
now with
the
the
people
people
from
from
Rebels,
Rebels,
Ahsoka,
Ahsoka,
Mandalorian and
Mandalorian and
Grogu,
Grogu,
stuff like
stuff like
that. Like
that.
they're
Like they're
building into
building
like
into
a
like the
big
big Avengers
forming of
moment of
Thrawn.
Thrawn.
And so
And
like
so
I
like I
don't
don't really
think
think
Grogu and
Grogu and
Mando are
Mando are
going
going
anywhere, but
anywhere,
like
but
do I
like do
think
I
they're
think
getting
they're
a
getting a
second
second
film?
film?
I don't
I don't
know.
know.
Right?
Right?
Right? Like
Like, I would love to see that, but, like,
reception
reception
wise,
wise, like,
are they gonna
are they
get the
gonna
money
get the
that they
money that
need?
they
You know, if
need,
they were to
if they
come
were
out
to
with a
come
second
out with a
film, like
second film? Like,
I really
I
liked
really
it.
liked it,
I liked
I
that they were
like
able
that
to
they were
take
able
that
to take
second
that
step.
second step, but,
With the
with the
situation
situation
of
of,
these Disney
these
Plus
Disney
shows
Plus shows
aren't doing as
aren't
well
doing
that they
as well that they
hoped,
hoped,
this movie
this
didn't do
movie
so
didn't do
well
so
that they
well that
hoped.
they hoped,
So
so
then, like,
then,
are
like,
we gonna
are
get
we gonna get
more
more
projects, right? Or are
projects,
we just
right?
gonna
Or are
go
we just
back
gonna
to
go
more
back to more
Skywalker saga
Skywalker
films,
Saga
right?
films,
Because like
right? Because, like,
everybody wants
everybody only
Skywalker
wants
saga
Skywalker
films,
Saga
like
films, like, nobody
Star Wars isn't
Star
gonna
Wars
make
isn't gonna
anything
make
else,
anything
right?
else,
Like I
right?
said,
Like I said,
they tried new things. They
they
tried
tried
a
a
backstory movie
backstory
with
movie
Solo,
with Solo,
didn't do well.
didn't do well.
They're doing
They're
this
doing their
Disney Plus
Disney Plus
shows,
shows, and then
Disney
Disney
Plus, like
Plus,
Star
like
Wars,
Star Wars,
Marvel, like
Marvel,
everything, you
everything,
name it,
name it,
got in trouble
got in
because they were
trouble because
working
they were
on
working on quantity or yeah,
quantity over
quantity over
quality.
quality,
And all that
and
just
all they're just I think that
fucked
fucked
everything on
everything
Disney
on
Plus.
Disney Plus. Like, everybody does
When
like
you say the
when you
word
say the
Disney
word
Plus,
Disney
everybody's kind
Plus,
of
everybody's kind of like,
right?
right?
What was
What was the like everybody's always like, oh, the last best thing on Disney Plus was like Loki or WandaVision or Mandalorian and Grogu. Take Andor aside from that.
There's nothing
There's
like
nothing like
recent that
recent
did
that
well,
did
and
well, and that's
my
not my
opinion.
opinion.
I think
I
that's
would
a lot
think
of
that's
other
a lot of other people's opinion, or like
Skeleton Crew.
Skeleton
That
Crew.
show came out
That show came
recently
out
for Star
recently for
Wars.
Star Wars.
Completely flew under
Completely
the radar.
flew under
No
the
one gave
radar.
a
No
crap.
one gave a
And
crap.
I would say
And
the
I would say the
situation that Star Wars
situation
is
that
in
Star Wars
now
is in
compared to
now
something
compared to something like Marvel,
they were
they
really
were
really
really
hot
really
in
hot
game, and
in
then they
game,
kind of
and then they kind of
fell out,
fell out,
fizzled
fizzled
out
out
into
into
Phase
Phase
4, and
Four, and
especially
especially
for
for
Phase
Phase
5.
Five, everybody's like,
I'm a Marvel
I'm a
hater,
Marvel
right?
hater, right?
And
And
now we're kind
now
of
we're kind of
slowly building
slowly
back up
building
steam
back
for
up steam for
Doomsday.
Doomsday,
Especially
especially going
going off
off
of
of Fantastic
Fantastic
Four,
Thunderbolts.
Thunderbolts.
They're
They're fixing
fixing
their
their
situation.
situation. Star Wars,
Star
they're
Wars,
not really in
they're
that
not really in
situation
that
right now. They
situation right
kind of
now. They're
they
kind of
fizzled
like they
out,
fizzled out, and
this was supposed to
this was
bring them
supposed to
back,
bring them
and
back, and
that's when
that's when
people,
people,
and
and
that's
that's
when
when
I'm
I'm
kind
kind
of
of like,
will we get another
will we
movie?
get
I don't
another
know,
movie?
because
I don't know, because like
if
if
this
this
was
was
supposed
supposed
to
to
bring
bring
them
them
back,
back, then
it didn't
it
do the
didn't
best
do the
job.
best job, and like
At the same time,
at
I
the
think
same
people
time,
are
I think people are
expecting too much.
expecting too much. I think we live in a society now with movies where like we need it to be like a big thing, like, especially at least for universes like this. Like, if you go watch a movie, you're gonna enjoy the movie for what it is. Like, you're not expecting a sequel. You're not expecting like, oh my god, I need to watch three other films for it. Like, that's just the average thing. You're watching a movie and it's a good movie. But for where we are now in the cinema of shared universes like this in Marvel and DC, like, one, people don't want to do homework. Two, if they're gonna make something, then like it needs to have a purpose, right? Like, they don't wanna just watch a movie or a show just because it came out, Like, I think people have grown beyond that, and I think that's why this movie didn't do so well, right? Like, it's a good movie, don't get me wrong, I love the movie. But what does the movie have to offer, right? Like why would I watch the movie if it doesn't offer anything, right? Like that's what people are saying. Like if I have to watch A, B, C, D, and E, but F doesn't offer anything, I'm just gonna skip F, right? And I think that's why some shows like Skeleton Crew didn't do well. Like what did it offer to Star Wars? Nothing. Or like the Acolyte. It offered stuff, but people don't like it. Personally, I'm not gonna get into the Acolyte like crazy much. Like I like the Acolyte. I thought it was really good. But in terms of relevancy, like they're focusing on a time period in Star Wars that no one like really is focusing on right now. Like, yes, if you like the books and you read the books, then like yeah, you're focused on that. But like beyond that, if we're just focusing on like movies and shows, like no one's talking about the High Republic. We're focusing on sequels and sequel trilogy and around the Mandalorian time. We're like, okay, well, like what are these projects moving towards yet? Like moving towards now? Like, we're getting a glimmer, right, with the Thrawn stuff and Ahsoka, but, like, people aren't really, like, pulled in, right, At least Marvel kinda, you know, put their pieces together and figured something out for Doom, like, we're working our way towards Doom,
Which is years
It's not
focused. Like,
perfect, but,
if you
kind of
go
figured
watch
it
a
out, but
movie, you're
Star
gonna enjoy the
Wars,
movie
they
for what
haven't
it
really,
is.
like,
Like, you're not expecting
said
a
anything, like,
sequel.
we
You're
know
not
as a
expecting like,
fan
oh my
that,
god,
like,
I need to
"Oh my
watch three
god,
other
we're gonna get
films
this
for it.
huge,
Like, that's just not.
Thrawn
At
Avengers
least
movie," right?
Marvel
Or, if you, like,
kinda
really follow
you know
Star Wars, then
put
but,
their
like, the
pieces
average fan,
together and
they don't know.
figured
And you're
something
watching
out
this
for
movie,
Doom. Like we're working
you
on
don't get any
Doom,
sense
and
of that. You're just like, "Oh, you had a really
it's not
cool adventure."
perfect, but kind
Like,
of figured it out. But Star
I
Wars,
think I
they
think
haven't
it
really like
sucks that we are in a
said anything. Like
situation
we
where
know as a fan
you
that
can,
oh
like,
my
have a
god, we're gonna
really
get this
good film
huge
like this, and it means
Thrawn
nothing.
Avengers
Like,
movie,
nobody
right?
cares.
Or
And I
if
think
you
that
like really
sucks.
follow Star
And I
Wars,
wish we
then
weren't in that
you know. But like the
situation, but
average fan,
we're
they
clearly
don't know.
not.
You're
And so I
watching this
think
movie,
studios
you're not
like
getting any sense of
Disney,
that. You're
and
we're gonna
Marvel and
record
Star Wars
into it.
have to address
Like,
that. Or same with
I think it
DC.
sucks that we
Like
are in a situation
Supergirl. Like I'm
where
not gonna get super into
you
Supergirl
can
because I'm
like
gonna do
have a really good
my own
idea
review
about
on
this
that.
and it means
But
nothing.
like I
Like no one
think the
cares.
reason it
And I think that
bombed
sucks.
beyond
And I
other
wish we
reasons
weren't in
is
that
because like
situation.
what did it
But I
offer,
think that we're
right?
not.
Like
But I
James
think
Gunn is
that
offering
studios
a
like
shared
Disney
universe that's gonna
like
have a big
Marvel and
bad,
Star Wars
but
have
we
to
don't really
address
know
that.
what
Or
the
same
big
with
bad is. We assume
DC.
from
Like
the end of Peacemaker, but
Supergirl.
one,
Like I'm
we
not
don't know
gonna
who the big
get
bad
super
is.
into Supergirl. I can
Two,
do my own review on that.
like
But like I think
what
the
he's
reason
going
it
for
bombed,
is movies where you don't have to
other
watch
reasons, is
A,
because
B,
like
C, and
what
D.
did it offer,
And that's
right?
a good idea in
Like
theory,
James Gunn is
right?
offering
Because
a
like that's
shared
the big gripe
universe
about
that's gonna
Marvel.
have a big
Like you
bad,
have to
but
watch
we don't really
every
know what the
single
big bad
thing
is. We
in order to
assume
understand.
from the end of
But
Peacemaker,
with
but
James
one, we don't know
Gunn,
who the big
he was
bad
like, no,
is.
no, no, you don't have to
Two,
watch every single thing to understand.
like
But then what's the point
what
of
he's
watching
going
the
for
movies and the
is
shows,
movies where
right?
you
Like
don't
if
have to
there's no
watch
point
A, B,
and it
C, and
doesn't
D.
connect
And that's a good idea
in the
in
sense that
theory,
like,
right?
A, I need to watch
Because
A,
like
B,
that's
C,
the
and
big
D,
gripe about Marvel
and it
is you
just
have
only
to
connects in
watch
the idea like,
every
oh, we're in the
single
same
thing
universe,
in
then
order to
nobody's gonna watch
understand.
it. And I think that's a reason
But with
why
James
Supergirl
Gunn, you know,
failed.
he
I'm
was
not
like,
saying
no,
it's
no,
the
no,
only
you don't
reason.
have to watch
I'm just
everything
saying
for you
like
to
that's a
understand.
reason, like,
But then
and
what's
at
the
the same
point of
time when you
watching these
watch it, you don't
movies and
see who the
shows,
big
right?
bad
Like
is.
if
You don't
there's
see
no
a
point
Thanos, you don't see a dark side, right?
in the sense that like oh, I need to watch
And I think
A, B, C,
Disney's having
D,
the same situation here. So
and just
studios are
fall
gonna
apart
have
from
to
the idea
address
of
like if you're gonna have
oh,
a
we
shared
see a
universe,
universe,
you're
then
gonna have
nobody's
to
gonna
address
watch it. And
early
I think
on
that's the
who's the
reason
big
why
bad,
Supergirl failed
right?
in
And
a
you're gonna
sense for
have to put out
Marvel. I'm just
projects
saying like that's
that
a reason
are
why.
relevant,
And at the same time, when you watch
and
it, you
it
don't see who the
sucks
big
again.
bad
Like
is. You
it's
don't
like
see
I
a
said, it
Thanos. You don't see a
sucks that I have
dark
to say
side,
this,
right?
because I thought this was a great film,
And I think
but you
Disney's
can't
having the
put
same
out something
situation
like
here. Is that
this
studios are gonna have to address if you're
and
gonna have a
keep
shared
putting them
universe,
out because
you're gonna
nobody's
have
gonna
to
watch them.
address
Like,
early
yeah,
on
people
who's the
might
big
watch them,
bad.
but after a while, if they don't
Projects
mean anything,
that
then like
are
there's no point. You're
relevant,
just wasting money, and
and
that's
it
sad.
sucks again. Like
That's really sad.
sucks that I have
But
to
I mean,
say
that's
this,
just in the times we are
because I
now,
thought this was a
and
great film,
there's nothing you can
but
do
you
about it.
can't put
So,
out something like
do I
this
think this is gonna get a sequel?
and
Probably
keep
not.
putting them out because
I wish
nobody's
it
gonna
would. I
watch them.
think the
Like, yeah,
most
people might watch them,
realistic thing
but
is
after a
maybe we don't
while,
see them
they don't
again until maybe
mean
Ahsoka
anything. That
2,
like,
season
there's no
2, or
point. You're
maybe
just
they'll get
wasting
season
money,
4 or
and
stuff
that's
like
sad.
that.
That's really
Um,
sad. But
I don't know.
that's just in
I
the
think it would
times
be
we are
awesome to
now,
see them
and
in a
there's
movie
nothing you can
again.
do
Like I
about
said,
it.
I
So,
like when things
do I
come
think
out in
it's gonna
movies
get a
as opposed to
sequel?
like
Probably
online,
not.
like
I
streaming
wish it
services,
would. I think
because I
the
mean, like
most
I
realistic
know
thing
like when I
is
say
maybe we
this,
don't see them
you're gonna
again
kind of
until maybe
argue with me, but
Ahsoka
just like give me a
2,
second.
season 2, or maybe we get
Um,
season
I think
4,
the
stuff like
production that we
that.
see and the care
Um,
that we see in
I
movies
don't know.
is a lot
I think it would
more
be awesome to
better
see
than we
them
see
in a
on
movie again.
shows.
Like I said, I like
And I know you're
when
gonna
things
say,
come out
well,
in movies as
in
opposed to like
modern streaming
online
service
and
shows,
streaming services,
there is
because
more production,
I
cost,
know like when I say
care
this,
and
you're
stuff
kind of
like that. And
gonna
yeah,
kind
you're
of argue
completely
with me,
right.
but just like give me a
But
second.
still, you still got the
I think
turnout
the
and all these
production
other
that we
different
see
factors
and the
that when it
care
comes
that we
into a
see in
movie,
movies
it's
is a
such
lot
much
more
more grand,
better
right? Like
than
you
we
can
see
spend
on
more money on
shows.
CGI, you can spend more
And
money
I know
on
you're gonna say,
sets,
well,
stuff like that. It
in
doesn't have to feel
modern
so,
streaming service
it's
shows, sure,
tiny.
there
It can
is more
feel grand and
production
stuff like that.
cost,
And,
care and stuff like
maybe
that.
moving forward for a sequel, maybe
But
the story isn't
still,
so
you still
simple.
got the
It's really
turnout
big,
and just all these other
right? And
different
I think another
factors that
issue is
when it
also
comes into
that,
a movie,
like I said,
it's
this movie was
so much
written
more
around the
grand,
time
right? Like
of
you
the
can
strikes, if
spend
I'm
more
not
money on
mistaken,
CGI, you can
and
spend
they
more
had to
money on
rework the
sets,
script
stuff like
from a
that. It doesn't have to
season
feel
into a movie,
so
and I think that's one of the issues.
it's
Now, if
tiny.
you're
It can
going into
feel
the
grand and stuff
sequel,
like that.
working on a script
And
that's just
maybe
for a
moving
movie, then
forward for a
maybe you
sequel,
get
maybe the
something
story
better.
isn't
Like
so
maybe this
simple.
sequel is
It's
20
really
times
big,
better.
right? And I
But
think another issue is also that,
can we even get to that
like I said, this
sequel,
movie
right?
was
Like
written
I don't
around
know.
the time of
I
the
don't
strikes, if
know.
I'm not mistaken.
But at the end of the
And they had to
day,
rework
Dave
the script
Filoni is going to do what
for
he
the season
wants.
into a
So
movie. And I
we'll
think that's
see.
one of the
I'm always here
issues.
for Star
Now
Wars films.
you're
Like I
going
love
into
Star
the
Wars.
sequel,
Um,
working
but
on a script that's
I don't know.
just for a movie,
I
and
don't know.
maybe you
But
get
yeah.
something better. Like maybe this sequel is 20
Moving
times
on.
better.
Public
But
perception versus personal
can we
reception.
even get to that sequel, right? Like
Yeah,
I
like I
don't
said, I
know.
really liked the film. I
I
thought it was really
don't
cool.
know.
I really really enjoyed it.
But at the end of the
Like I said, a
day,
lot of people
Dave
didn't like
Filoni
it,
is
and
going to do
like
whatever.
I've already kind of got
See,
into that,
listen,
so I'm not gonna
I was here for
like
Star Wars
get
films, and
back
I love
into
Star
that.
Wars.
But yeah, I liked
Um,
it. I know a lot of people
but
didn't like it.
I don't
There's
know.
some people that really did like this movie, and then like maybe it will have a second
Okay.
life as we move on
Yeah,
to
that's interesting.
streaming because
Yeah, like I said,
hasn't
I
come
really
out
liked
yet.
the
I'm
film.
pretty
I thought it was really
sure.
cool. I really
But
enjoyed
it's
it.
gonna probably
Like I
come out
said, a lot of
soon,
people
like the
didn't
next
like
month or
it,
two. So
which
maybe
I've already
it'll
kind
get
of got
really
into that, so
big.
I'm not gonna get back
But
into that.
I
But like,
think
I liked it. I
Star
loved
Wars
it. I
needs to
really
come
enjoyed
back
it.
into
There's
theaters.
some people that
I
really
have no
did like
issue
this
with stuff
movie,
being
and
on
then like
Disney
maybe
Plus
it
and
will
stuff like
have a
that.
second life
But
as
like
we
I
move
feel like
on
Star
to
Wars has kind of lost its relevancy,
streaming
right?
because
Like the
hasn't
big
come
thing
out
was
yet.
you're
I'm
gonna
pretty
go see a
sure.
new Star Wars film every
But
few
it's gonna
years in
probably
theaters,
come
right?
out
And like
soon, like the next month or two.
that was
So
the thing.
maybe it'll get really big.
But you know the sequels are kind of
But
poopy
I
water,
think
and then this came out
Star
and
Wars
wasn't
needs
so
to come
hot.
back into
But like
theaters. I
you
have
need to
no
be
issue
put
with
back
stuff being
into
on
you
Disney
need to put
Plus and
Star
stuff
Wars
like
film
that.
back in theaters, right?
But
You know I know they're working on a
it's
sequel,
kind of
another
lost its
trilogy with
relevancy, right?
Ray
Like the
and
big
stuff
thing
like
was you were
that.
gonna go
So
see a
maybe
new
that'll
Star Wars
bring
film
Star
every
Wars
few years
back
in
to
theaters,
some
right? Like
relevancy. But like it needs to
that
be
was
a
that was
good
the
movie.
thing. But
And
Those
I'm
those
not gonna
sequels
get
kind of
super into
moved
the
you
Star
on,
Wars
but and
situation
then this
again, but
came
like
out and it wasn't so hot.
we need to see
Like
a presence
they
of
need to be put back into
in the
they need to
movies,
put Star Wars film
like the
back
movie
into movies,
industry, well,
right?
not
You know, I
industry,
know they're
like
working
the
on
movie
prequel
theaters
trilogy
again
with the
in order to like
trilogy
kind of gain
and
back
stuff
that
like
fan
that. So
base,
maybe
right?
that'll bring Star Wars back
But
to
yeah,
some relevancy, but like
I don't know.
that needs to be a
That's kind of
good
just how I see
movie.
it. It's kind of how
And
I see it.
like I'm not gonna get super into the
As for the
Star Wars
longevity
situation
of the
again, but
film, like what do I think
we
about
need
this
to see a
film?
presence of
I don't think
the
it's going to be in a
movies,
lot of people's
like the movie
collections,
industry
right?
collections,
That's just
but
kind of like the
in order to
brutality,
like
of
kind
the
of gain
brutal
back that
truth.
fan base, right?
Um, Maybe if you're a huge Star Wars fan, you might
That's
have it
fine.
in your collection. Like I'll have it in my collection. I'll
Yeah,
buy the disc. But maybe some Star Wars fans that didn't really like it, they're gonna be like, I don't really see a reason to why I need this, right? And like obviously you're competing with streaming, right? I can't really give you like the cut and dry, right? And like, will this even be a streaming legend? I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
Like it could, like sometimes stuff comes out on like in theaters and it was really bad, and it comes out in streaming, and you're like, wow, right? And there's some movies that you can see like that will do well in streaming. This, I don't even know. I don't even know. Maybe just for the mere fact that maybe a lot of people didn't watch it when it came out because the word of mouth was like not so great, and maybe they're like, all right, well, it's free on Disney Plus. Maybe I'll give it a chance. But I really don't know. Like, I don't really know a lot of people that are like, oh, I'm gonna check out that Mandalorian and Grogu on Disney Plus, right, when it drops. So I don't even know. Like to me, I think it might be like a niche favorite, and like I really don't want to say forgotten, but just maybe, right? Like, and that makes it sound like this movie's bad. It's not, but just like I was saying, in terms of relevancy, it's not there. Like no one
Like
like
it really
really
cares,
cares,
right?
right?
Like
Like
yeah,
yeah,
we
we
got
got
Mandalorian and
Mandalorian and
Grogu,
Grogu,
like
like
that's
that's
cool,
cool,
but
but
like
like
in
in
terms of
terms of
like the
like the
bigger
bigger picture,
picture,
like
who's
who's
gonna
gonna
care?
care?
So
So
I
I'm
probably
probably
have
gonna
to
have to
say
say
probably
probably
more
more
like
like
niche
niche
favorite.
favorite.
Like
Like
people
people
are
are
like
like
people
people
that
that
like
like
this
this
film
film
are
are
gonna
gonna
like
like
it,
it,
right?
right?
Like
Like
I
I
like
like
it.
it.
I'll
I'll
probably
probably
watch it
watch it
again
again
whenever I
whenever I
get
get
the
the
chance.
chance.
But
But
it's
it's
not
not
gonna
gonna
be
be
in the
anybody's
collection.
collection.
For
For
the
the
most
most
part,
part,
and
and
it
it
probably
probably
won't be
won't
a
be a
streaming
streaming
legend.
legend.
It's
It's
probably
probably
gonna
gonna
be a
be a
niche
niche
favorite.
favorite.
But
But
it's
it's
not
not
terrible
terrible
that
that
we're
we're
all
all
like
like
screw
screw
this
this
movie.
movie.
This
Like
is
this is
not the
not the
worst
worst
Star
Star
Wars
Wars
film.
film.
I
I
still
still
think the
think the
worst
worst
Star
Star
Wars
Wars
film
film
was
was
Rise
Rise
of
of
Skywalker.
Skywalker.
So
So but
this
this
just
is
leagues
leagues
beyond
beyond
that.
that.
But
But
there,
there,
people,
people,
fans
fans
and
and
Star
Star
Wars
Wars
fans
fans
are
are
gonna
gonna
be
be,
hating
hating
on
on
this
this
already,
already,
and
and
who
who
knows?
knows?
But
But I
but
mean,
at the
at the
same
same
time,
time,
like
like
who
who
knows?
knows?
Star
Star
Wars
Wars
fans
fans
always
always
be
be
like
like
fucking
fucking
changing
changing
their
their
minds.
minds.
Like
Like
they
they
said
said
the
the
prequels
prequels
were
were
ass,
ass,
and
and
now
now
like
like
that's the
that's the
holy
holy
grail.
grail.
So
So
I
I
mean,
mean,
who
who
even
even
knows
knows
what's
what's
gonna
gonna
happen
happen
with
with the
sequels in
sequels in
10
10
years,
years,
right?
right?
People are
People are
saying
saying
they're
they're
ass,
ass,
but
but
maybe
maybe
we'll
we'll
come
come
back
back
and
and
we'll
we'll
love
love
them.
them.
And I
And I
can
can
only
only
hope
hope
like
like
that's what
that's what
happens with
happens with
this
this
movie.
movie. Like
People
people
are
are
like,
like,
you
you
know,
know, um,
hating
hating
on
on
it,
it,
and
and
then
then
like
like
in
in
30
30
years
years
time,
time,
they're
they're
like,
like,
oh
oh
my
my
god,
god,
it's
it
a
was a
really
really
good
good
film.
film.
I
I
mean,
mean, I don't know.
I
I
don't know.
don't know.
And
And
it
that
kind of
kind of
goes
goes
back to
back to
that
that
situation I
situation
was
I was
talking
talking
about
about
where
where,
modern
modern
audiences
audiences
are
are
just
just
so
so
focused
focused
on
on
like,
like,
what are
what
the
are the
relevancy
relevancy
of
of
this?
this?
Like
Like
they
they
don't
don't
like,
like,
especially
especially in shared
shared universe
universe
things.
things,
They
like they
don't
don't
focus
focus
on
on
just,
just,
oh, that
oh,
was
that
a
was
good
a good
film,
film,
right?
right?
That was
That
a
was a
good. That
good
was that was
that
really
was really
good.
good.
They're
They're
so
so
focused
focused
on
on
like,
like,
oh,
oh,
like what's
what's
the
the
big
big
moment?
moment?
Like
Like
what
what
are
are
we
we
building
building
up
up
to?
to?
But
But
yeah,
yeah,
and
and
so
so
like
like
maybe
maybe,
in
in
due
due
time
time
we'll
we'll
have
have,
moved
moved
on
on
from
from
that
that
type of
type of
thinking,
thinking,
and we
and
can
we can
appreciate
appreciate
both.
both.
But
But
we'll
we'll
see,
see, we'll see,
we'll
we'll
see.
see.
All
All
right.
right.
As
As
for
for some of my personal favorite parts about this film,
favorite shot,
favorite
favorite
shot, favorite
scene, and favorite
scene, and
quote.
favorite quote.
So for
So
me,
for me,
my favorite
my
shot in the
favorite shot
film,
of the film,
because I know we were talking about
because I know we were talking about
cinematography earlier, and
cinematography
there's a
earlier, and
lot of
there's a
really cool
lot of
shots in
really
the
cool
film. But one
shots
of
in
my
the film.
favorite
Like one of my
shots,
favorite shots,
not the
not
favorite shot, one
the
of my
favorite
favorite
shot,
shots
one
in
of
the
my
film
favorite
is kind
shots
of
in the
like when
film. It's kind of like
Grogu is
when
on top
Grogu
of
is on
Mando,
top of
like when he's in
Mando,
the
like when he's in the like
hut,
little hut
he's protecting
and
him,
he's protecting him,
and he's like
and he's like
meditating.
meditating. To
It's
me,
very
it's
reminiscent of
very
Yoda.
reminiscent
Like
of
that's the
Yoda.
point.
Like that's the point.
We're in the
We're in the
forest. We're
forest.
in his
We're
hut.
in
It kind
his
of looks like
hut. It kind of looks like
Yoda's hut from the
Yoda's
original
hut from the
trilogy.
original
I don't
trilogy.
know. I think
I don't know.
like a
I think
scene
like
like
a
a shot
scene
like
like a
that
shot like that
is very
is very
right?
Star
Like
Wars, right?
you
Like
think of Star
you
Wars, you think
think
of
of Star
Jedi,
Wars,
you
you
think
think
of
of Jedi, you
lightsabers, you
think
think of
meditate, you
Force,
think the Force,
and it was just a really
and
good
it was
shot.
just a
So
really good
I
shot.
want to
So
give it
I want to give
the
it the
appreciation that it
appreciation
deserves.
that it
But
deserves. But
if I had to pick a
if
shot
I had
like
to
I
pick a
always
shot
do,
like I always do
that represents
that
the entire
represents the
film,
entire film,
that would have to
that would
be
have to
when
be
Grogu
when
gets
Grogu
in the
gets in the
Mandalorian's arms,
Mandalorian's
like when
arms, like when he's
close to death
close
and
to
he
death
falls
and he
asleep.
falls asleep.
That means
That
everything. Like the
means
whole theme
everything,
of
like the whole theme
family,
of
all that.
family, all that.
Because at the end of the
Because at
day,
the end of the
he's a
day,
bounty
he's
hunter.
a bounty hunter. He's baby alien. They care deeply about each other. They're gonna go through the ends of the earth to save each other, to help each other, and that's what matters. It's a father-son relationship. Grogu, he doesn't know if Mando's gonna wake up in the morning, but he's just gonna take the time there. He's gonna be there. He's gonna be present. He's gonna, he's showing that he loves him. He's gonna get in trouble. He's gonna eat too many cookies or whatever, but at the end of the day, he still loves Mando, and I think that shot of, him in the arm is just it's really nice because I really liked getting, the POV of Grogu and getting to see, obviously we know Grogu loves Mando, but I don't know, that was just an awesome shot, Mando's usually the gunslinger, the tough guy, but we got to see, like, a very authentic and, compassionate Grogu in that scene. I don't know, that's just my favorite shot from the movie, like, like I always say, if I pick a shot, it should tell me the whole scene, like, the whole movie. That tells me the whole movie, when he's in, Mando's arm and he's, like, kinda going to bed, kinda going to sleep, that's my favorite shot. As for my favorite scene is gonna be when Mando is watching, Rada and Grogu playing on the beach. Because yes, we're getting back into that theme of family, but, like, there's 2 things going on here. You're seeing there's actually multiple things going on here. Like, Rada, is getting to experience a little bit of that childhood that he missed out on, playing with Grogu, feeling that happiness finally for the first time. He's finally free. He's escaped that gladiator area, so he's on the beach, it's sunny, it's very exciting for him. He's finally got that first chance of freedom. So that's one thing. Grogu, he's happy. He's got a friend. His family is growing. And then Mando, he's looking at both of these guys. He's like, he was kind of in the same situation as Rada. He didn't get to really have a childhood because it kind of got taken away from him. But then he's looking at Grogu because he wants like a better future for him. But he knows,
And they care deeply
the
for each
lifestyle that
other.
he
They're gonna
brings,
go
he
through the
still puts him in
interior,
trouble. So
save each other,
there's a
love each
lot
other,
going on here,
and that's what
and it's a
matters.
very
It's a
short
father-son
scene. But
relationship.
I think it speaks volumes. I think
Grogu,
it's a really
he
really
doesn't
good
know if
scene.
Mando's gonna wake up.
And I'm sure,
He's just gonna take the time
in
to
that
go do
scene,
that. He's gonna be
Mando's
present. He's
contemplating like,
gonna,
what does the
he's
future look like,
showing
right? Like,
that he loves him.
how
He's
do I
gonna
give
do
this
his job.
kid a
He
good future
knows,
without putting him in danger,
the lifestyle
And
that he brings. He
how do
still
I
puts him
stay
in
true to
trouble. So
myself at the same time?
there's a lot going
It's a
on
really good
there.
shot. I mean,
It's a very
scene.
short
It's
scene, but
short, but it's a really
I think
good
it
scene.
speaks volumes. I think
As
it's a
for my
really
favorite
really good
quote, I
scene.
actually have two.
And I'm
Let
sure
me get my paper out.
in that scene, like
The first one
Mando is
is
contemplating
when
like, what does the
Grogu
future look
and
like?
Mando are
Like,
trying to
how do I
escape
give this
on
guy,
Tal Hada,
how do I give this kid
and
a good future
that's
without
when
putting him in
Mando's like,
danger?
"Oh, the ship's too
And how
big,"
do
and
I
he kind of gets
stay
gagged.
true to myself
So
and
the
stuff
quote I
like
have
that?
here is,
It's a
"Go,
really good
kid.
shot. I
I
mean, scene.
cannot fit
It's
inside
short,
that thing,
but it's a really good scene.
but you have to leave.
As for my favorite
Don't
quote, I
worry, I'm
actually have
right
two.
behind you." Not so much on the
Next
first
to my
half, but that
paper
second
out.
half. Like the fact that I'm
The
right
first one
behind you.
is
We're
when
getting into
Grogu
that
and
theme
Mando are trying
of
to escape
beginning and
on Tal
endings,
Hada,
right?
and
We're not always
that's
going to
when
be here.
Mando's
And I
like,
think
"Oh,
this,
the
like,
ship's too big,"
the
and he kind
shots
of gets gagged.
where
So the
Grogu is
quote I have
running
here
and then
is,
Mando gets
"Go
there and he kind of
kid, I
stops.
cannot fit
That's
inside that
very
thing,
reminiscent of what they're
but
trying
you
to
have to
talk
leave.
about in
Don't
this
worry,
movie. Like,
I'm right behind
yes,
you."
they're
Not
running
so much in the
together,
first half, but that
but
second half, like
Grogu's
the
gonna go
fact that I'm
so
right
many
behind
more
you.
miles
We're getting
beyond
into that
Mando, right?
theme
They're
of
not gonna
beginning and
go,
endings, right? We're
together.
not
And I
always
think
gonna
that
be here.
whole,
I
like,
think
yeah, it's
like
funny because
the
Mando can't
shot
fit in the ship,
where
but
Grogu is
like
running and
that's
then Mando
the
gets there and he kind of
that's the
stops
future of
is
it.
very
Like, there's
reminiscent
a
of what they're trying to
future, a
talk about in
Grogu-sized
this
future
movie.
that
Like,
the Mando
yes,
doesn't
they're
fit
running
in,
together, but
and
Grogu's gonna
that's
go
the
so
reality of
many
it.
more
And like,
miles beyond
yes,
Mando, right?
Mando's
They're
kind of like
not gonna
shocked,
go,
but he's also that's
together.
reality
And I
hit
think
him
that
right
whole
in the
like,
face.
yeah, it's
And
funny
so when he's
because
like, when
Mando
he's
can't fit in
telling
the
him,
ship,
he's like,
but like
you have to leave.
the
He's telling him
that's the
basically,
future of it.
if you're reading
Like
between the
there's
lines,
a
like you got to move
future,
on,
a Grogu
right?
sized
Because at this
future that
point,
the
I think
Mando doesn't fit in,
Mando's like, he's probably gonna
and
die.
that's the
And
reality
so he's
of it.
telling Grogu, he's like, hey, you
Yes,
got to keep going, buddy.
Mando's kind of
He's
like
like, I'm gonna be right
shocked,
behind you.
but he's also
Like he'll be
the
there for him,
reality
but
hit him right in the
he's
face.
not
And
always
so
gonna
when he's
be
like
there.
when he's telling him,
And I
he's
think
like,
this gets
you
amplified by the
have to
quote
leave. He's
from
telling him
Gatori when he's
basically,
telling
you're reading
Grogu when he
between the
gives him the
lines.
medicine
You
later,
got
and
to
he's
move
like,
on,
"Hey, it might not
right?
work."
Because at this
He
point, I
gives
think
him this quote. He's like,
Mando's like,
"There
you know
comes a
he's probably gonna
time when
die.
all you have to do is say goodbye," and that's what we're
He'll
getting
be right
to. Like,
behind you. Like he'll be there for him,
Grogu's
but
having to grow up
he's
himself
not
here in this
always gonna be
movie.
there.
He might have
And
to
I
say
think this gets
goodbye to,
amplified by the
or
quote
he's going to have to
from
say
Gatori
goodbye
when he's telling
to Mando.
Grogu when he
Maybe
gives him the
not in
medicine
this
later. He's
film,
like, hey,
but
you might
moving
not work.
forward, he's going
He
to
gives
have
him this
to.
quote.
Like
He's
that
like,
scene that we got in the
all you
Mandalorian
have to
show,
do
season 2 or
is
3,
say
I don't know,
goodbye.
whatever.
And that's what we're getting to.
When
Like
he gives up,
Grogu's having to grow
Luke
up himself
in the
here in this
Jedi Order,
movie. He
he does
might
that
have to say
momentarily.
goodbye
Like,
to
yeah, I mean, I don't
or
know
he's
what
going to
Grogu's
have to
gonna
say
do,
goodbye
30 years
to
time,
Mando.
if
Maybe
they
not
keep
in
coming
this
out with
film, but moving
movies.
forward, he's going to have
But
to.
like
Like that scene that we got
this
in the
Mandalorian
Mandalorian show,
chapter that's
season
in his
two
life
or
is so
three. I don't
tiny
remember.
compared to everything
When
else. Like
he gives up,
it's like there's
Luke
gonna be a
in the
goodbye.
Jedi
Like
Order, he does
Mandalorian's
that
gonna die
momentarily. Like,
eventually, and
yeah, I mean,
Grogu's
I
gonna
don't
have
know
to
what
keep
Grogu's
going
gonna
on with
do,
his life.
in 30 years time.
And it's
If
such a
they
like
keep
a
coming out with
sad
prequels
like
movies.
reality, but it's the truth. And I think it's like
this
w-
Mandalorian
something that
chapter
a
that's
part of the film that I
involved is
really
so
enjoy. Like,
tiny
yeah,
compared to
like they got
everything
back
else.
together and stuff like that. You get to see in the show, but
It's
here
like
you
it's
really get to
really a
take
good
that next
plot.
step
Like
forward, and you're like, okay, well,
Grogu
this is the grim
Mandalorian's gonna
reality of
die
what's going to go on
eventually.
forward.
Like
Like,
he's
yeah,
gonna
he's
die.
going to
He
become a
will go
Jedi.
on with his
It's
life.
not that.
And
It's the
it's
fact
such
that
a
they
like a sad
finally
like
are
reality, but
together.
it's the truth. And I think
You
it's
know,
like
two worlds that shouldn't be brought
something
together,
that
and
a
that
part
they
of the film that I
are.
really enjoy. Like
And
like they got back
beyond
together and
everything
stuff
that they
like
keep
that. You
trying to
just
do
see
to
in the
keep
show,
them
but
together, it's just
you
the
really get to take that next
reality of
step
the
forward, and you're like, okay, well,
situation
this is the
is
grim
that they're not
reality of
going to
what's
stay
gonna go
together,
on forward. Like
and that's what
he's
sucks.
gonna become a
You know,
Jedi.
they're
But
two great
it's
people
not
that
that.
love each
It's
other,
the fact that they
but just their
finally are
circumstances
together.
aren't the best. And like Rada says, you got to make the
Two
best of
worlds
it.
that
And,
shouldn't be
you
brought
got to
together,
say
but
goodbye
they
sometimes. And
are.
you got to keep going forward.
And
And
beyond everything
those
that
are
they
some
keep
of my
trying to do
favorite
to
things
keep
from
them
the film.
together,
So
it's
I
just
really liked it.
the
That's why I like the
reality
film
of
so
the
much. It's very like
situation
character
is that they're
centric.
not going to stay
You know,
together,
even if we're not
and that's
going
what sucks.
crazy on the character
The two
development.
great people that love each
But
other,
yeah,
but just their
as for my
circumstances.
final opinion on the film,
Like Rada said, you got to
I
make the
thought it was a
best
good
of it,
film.
and
Like I said,
you got to say
if you're a
goodbye
Star Wars fan,
sometimes, and you
definitely go
got to
check
keep
it
going
out. If you
forward.
like sci-fi
And
films,
those are
definitely
some of
check
my
it
favorite
out.
things from
If
the
you just
film.
want a
So
fun
I
film to
really
watch
liked
with
it,
your
and
family,
that's why
definitely check
I
it
like the
out. Like
film so
you
much.
should
It's
definitely
very
check it
like
out.
character centric.
Um,
Even if we're not going crazy on the
Now
character
I do
development.
know like there's some issues with it,
But
but
yeah,
like every film has issues, right?
as
Like
for my
nothing's like
final opinion on the film,
like 5 out of 5,
I
10
thought it was
out
a
of
good
10,
film, like I
right?
said.
I mean, you get
If you're
really
a Star Wars
close to
fan, definitely
that,
check it out. If you like
and you
sci-fi
got your
films,
classics in film,
definitely check it out.
but
If you just want a
what's wrong
fun
with
film
just
to
a
watch
good
with your family,
film,
definitely
right?
check out
Like
Lemme.
good,
You should definitely check it
happy
out.
action film. There's nothing wrong with that. But we're in an
Now I do
era
know
now
like
of
there's some
film
issues
where,
with it, but
if it's
like
not
every film has
Oscar,
issues, but like nothing
level, then like what's the point,
like
right? Or if we don't have
10 out of 10,
800
right? If you get
cameos,
really close to
what's the
that,
point? Yeah,
and you
I don't
got your
know.
classics in
Like
film,
I don't want to get super into that. Like I'll
what's
save
wrong
that for
with
like
just
its
a
own
good film,
video.
right? Like good,
But I mean,
happy
it's a good film.
action
I
film.
liked
There's
it. I
nothing
didn't see
wrong
the
with
issue
that.
with it, and
And we're in an
I
era
wish more
now of
people like
film where
gave it
if it's not
gave it a
Oscar,
chance. And that's why I
level,
say you
then
should
like
definitely go
what's the
check it
point,
out.
right? Or we don't have
Um,
800
it's a good
cameos,
Star
like
Wars
what's
film.
the
Like
point?
obviously, it's not
I don't
exactly
know.
like Star Wars,
Like I don't want
just
to get
like the
super
other
into
ones.
that. Like
But
I'll save that for like its own video.
I'm happy with the
But
swing
I mean, it's a
in
good
the
film. I liked it.
maybe if you want
I
to
didn't
call it
see
a
an issue
miss. I don't
with
know.
it,
I
and
call it a ground ball,
I
whatever
wish more people
that they got with it.
gave it gave it a
I would like to
chance.
see
And
more
that's why I say you
films
should
moving
definitely go
forward
check it out.
from this, idea of like,
It's a good
we're not
Star
going to be
Wars
stuck in the
film. Like
Skywalker
obviously it's
saga.
not
Let's try
exactly
to
like
move
Star Wars,
outside of that.
just like the other
But I
ones,
mean, I
but
really don't know. We'll see, we'll
I'm
see. But
happy with the
without a
swing
doubt,
and
this is
the
a really good film. I had a good time.
even
I
if
got
you
to
want to
see
call
this
it a
with my
miss, I don't
mom
know. I called it ground
and
ball,
my
whatever.
uncle.
They
You guys
got a lot with
remember my
this.
introduction video? I told you my
I would
uncle,
like
and
to
then
see more
I called him
films
Uncle
moving
A,
forward
was the
from
one that
this
introduced me to Star Wars.
idea
So I got to
of
see this one
we're not
again
gonna be
with
stuck in the
him.
Skywalker
I
saga.
we've been
Let's try to
seeing
move
the
outside
last
of
couple
that.
Star Wars,
But
or
I mean, I really don't know. We'll see. We'll
starting
see. But without a
from
doubt, this is a really good
The
film. I had a
Force
good time. I
Awakens.
got to
We've
see this with my
seen all of
mom
the Star Wars films
and
on
my
opening
uncle.
night, like those
You guys
Thursday
remember
nights. So
my
it's really good to
introduction video? I told
get
you
the chance to see that
2016.
again with him today, or whenever I saw this like in May. So that was really good to get to see that with him opening night. I really enjoyed it, and I think that's another big thing is like what's one of the big reasons people love Star Wars because they get to go spend time with their families on opening night or on the weekend whenever you go watch the movie, and you get to go see it in theaters, and like that's a really big part about movies themselves that are really, authentic and why so many people like them. And that's what I was saying, like, you need to bring Star Wars back to theaters because I love it, prior to this, there was not many Star Wars films coming out, right? Like, yeah, I can go watch Star Wars at home
Why
on
so many
Disney
people
Plus all
like
I
them.
want, but,
And that's what I was saying.
I'm
You
not
have
gonna
to
have
bring
the same feeling I did when I see it with my
Star Wars
family.
back to
And, like,
theaters. Because
there's
right
nothing
now,
wrong just having a good film, just watching it.
prior to
Like,
this,
yeah,
there
it'd be
was
cool to
not many
see,
Star
like,
Wars films coming out, right?
Oscar
Yeah, I can go watch Star Wars at
level
home on
Star
Disney
Wars
Plus
films,
all I
but I mean,
want,
at the end of the
but
day, Star
I'm
Wars
not
makes
gonna have the
good
same feeling I did
action-packed,
when I see it with my family.
fun
And
films,
like,
and like I
and
didn't
there's
have an
nothing wrong
issue
with
with that,
having
and
a good film. You
thought
just
that's what
watch it.
this movie
Like, yeah, it'd
was,
be cool to see
and that's why I'm gonna have to give it a
Oscar
3.5 out
level
of the
Star Wars
Joshua
films.
scale.
But I mean, at
Remember,
the end
like
of
I
the day,
say,
Star Wars
0 to 5
makes good,
halves
action-packed,
included. It's a pretty good
fun
film. Like
films,
I
and
liked it.
I didn't have an
I didn't
issue
see
with
an
it. And I
issue with it,
thought
and
that's a
that's what
good
I'm gonna
movie.
say. Everybody else,
And that's why I'm gonna have to give
you
it
can
a
form your own
3.5
opinion on it. I have no
out of
issue with
the
that.
Joshua
Let me
scale.
know down
Remember, like
below
I
what you
said,
thought about the film,
0 to
but
5
I thought it
halves
was really
included.
good.
It's a pretty good film. Like I liked
But
it.
yes,
I
that will
didn't see
be
issue with it,
my
and
review
that's what I'm
of The
gonna say. If
Mandalorian and
everybody
Grogu. I
else,
hope you guys like it.
you can form your own
Like I
opinion on
always
it. I
say,
have no issue with
everything I say
that.
in my
Let me
videos
know
is
down
very
below what you
opinion
thought about the
based. So
film.
like
I
obviously
thought it
like
was really good.
you might not agree with me, or
Yes, that
since
will
it's a
be
movie,
my
which is an
review
art
of The
form,
Mandalorian and Grogu. I
what I
hope you guys like
interpret,
it.
especially in my theme
Like I always
section,
say, everything I
might
say in
not
my
be what you
videos is
see.
very
So
opinion
definitely
based.
let
So
me know, like, what did you
obviously,
see? What
you
did you
might not
like
agree
about the
with
film?
me,
What did you
or
not like about the
since
film?
it's a
Maybe you
movie,
saw
which
something
is
that
an
I
art
saw and you
form,
want to build on that.
what
Tell
I
me. Tell me
interpret,
below.
especially in
I
my
really
theme section,
I like
might not be
talking to
what
people
you
about
see.
movies.
So definitely let me
I
know,
like
like, what
talking
did
to
you
people
see?
about
What did you like about
fandoms
the
that I
film? What
like:
did you not
Marvel,
like about the
Star Wars,
film? Maybe you
DC,
saw something that
Invincible,
I
stuff
saw
like
and you want to
that.
build on that. Tell me. Tell
Gaming,
me below.
I
Like,
like talking to people about my common
I like
interests, and that's why
talking
I
to
make
people
these
about
videos. Not only
movies. like
so I
talking
can
to
talk
people
about my
about
opinion, but, I wanna hear
expanding
somebody
the
else, like,
Marvel,
tell me,
Star
like,
Wars,
"I did like
DC
Mandalorian and
principles,
Grogu,
stuff
but,
like that.
maybe these were some of the
Bane.
issues that I
I
had
like
with it, and,
talking to
like,
people
let's chat
about
it up."
different
I
interests,
have
and
no
that's why I
issue with
make
that, like,
reviews. Not only
that's why I enjoy
so
doing
I
that.
can
I enjoy
talk
doing
about
that,
my
but, like,
opinion,
definitely
but
let me know.
I want to hear somebody
Um,
else tell me
we're gonna
I
have
didn't
some
really like
more
Mandalorian and
reviews
Grogu,
coming
but
out soon, so
maybe
stay
these were
tuned.
some of the issues that I had with it, and
But
let's
yeah,
chat it
I
up.
was really
I have no
excited
issue
to
with that. Like
make this review and
that's
get
why
back
I
on
enjoy
track,
doing
and I
that.
hope
I
you
enjoy
guys
doing
like
that.
it.
But like definitely let me know.
Thank you guys. I'll see you
Um,
guys next time.